The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Saturdays or Sundays, SOR Media, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of SOR Media is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced? Then come own the night with us.
Little brother has taken control, shoveling dirt in every hole. Predators to condemn your soul, watching you and watching me. We're all
stationed atop the mountains of British Columbia, live from SOR headquarters. This is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
We live behind glass curtains and act like nothing's wrong. Soon you will belong.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, and on Spaced Out Radio on iTunes. You can follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and on Instagram at Dave Scott SOR, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio.
Brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We will expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye.
It's Thursday, March 8th, Friday, March 9th, if you're on the East Coast or across the pond. And this is Spaced Out Radio. Hope you had a great day and night. I am your host, Dave Scott, live from the Great White North in the Caribou region, on top of the snowy mountains of central British Columbia, stationed at SOR headquarters. We're 150,000 strong nightly on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live at spacedoutradio.com, Spreaker, The Fringe FM. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to revolution.radio and donate today. We're all over social media. Follow us on periscope.tv live right now. Hi, Periscope. How are you? We're on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like. Spaced Out Radio Show on Instagram. You can follow me at Dave Scott SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio for our archives. We're on iHeartRadio in the United States. TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. And, of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. Yes, let's get the plethora going tonight. You can do a little shopping at our Spaced Out Radio store. Read up on the encounter online, dealing with everything paranormal, strange, and odd. Check out my latest blog there as well. We got great videos from UFO seekers, Contact TV, and so much more. You know, Hollywood is a strange place. For behind every major motion picture and studio, there is some strange and hidden folklore that to most is just rumor, until someone comes out and speaks against it. I mean, recently we only have to look as far as Harvey Weinstein, the pig that he is, to see the truth and merit of some of the ways people get their film roles. Then there are former movie stars, former popular people on the scene like Randy Quaid and Corey Feldman, who have said their lives are in jeopardy for exposing some of these secrets behind the glamour. Then we turn to the movies themselves. In there, many of them, they have these hidden gems, from R2-D2 being on Star Trek to the 88 of them in Back to the Future. Every movie seems to have these Easter eggs. Robert Sullivan IV makes his second appearance on Spaced Out Radio tonight. He is going the distance. Mr. Sullivan is a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason and an accomplished writer, authoring numerous books, including Cinema Symbolism, a guide to esoteric imagery in popular movies, which was republished, just last year. He also released last year part 2 of that, Cinema Symbolism 2, more esoteric imagery from popular movies. And we're glad to have Robert back on the show tonight because it's always fun when we got him here. Robert, great to have you back on. What have you been up to, my friend?
Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me back on Spaced Out Radio. Yeah, it's great to be here. No, I've just been real busy here. A lot's been coming up, since the last time I was on, which I think was about back in November, if I recall correctly. No, just been busy working, doing some lawyer work. I was commissioned to write another book, which I've delved into. And that I'm bound by a non-disclosure agreement with, but I can't really get into that. No, but promoting the one book, the 2 movie books which you mentioned, of course, Royal Arch, and then I've released my first work of fiction back in December, which was called A Pact with the Devil. I'm really pleased with the way that came out. I'm currently working on its sequel, and actually a prequel to it. I've got another book on Masonry going, as well as naturally Cinema Symbolism 3. Some of the movies that I couldn't cover in the first 2, we'll have to get into in part 3. So yeah, a lot going on here.
I know the feeling, my friend. I am actually in the process of writing my first book right now. I'm on chapter 3. It's a sci-fi, and I want to keep it a little bit tight, but it involves aliens, the president, shadow people, everything. It's just a mess, but it's so much fun, man. Like last night, I got to tell you, my entire internet system here went down in the studio, and I was so mad and frustrated. It's amazing what you can get done when you take your anger out on writing a book.
Yeah, I do consider writing to be somewhat therapeutic. I've never really had to, with anger, but I can certainly understand that. I'm down here in Baltimore on the East Coast, and we had last week a nor'easter come through, and I was without power for like 3 days. So, I'm making note, I want to write, but I can't, of course, I have no computer. So I'm making notes all over the place of stories and story arcs and things like that, and movies, that I remembered that I wanted to talk about. So yeah, I do know that feeling. But no, writing is good. And certainly, yeah, absolutely. Fiction is really fun. I actually like fiction, I think, a little bit more than the nonfiction, because with the nonfiction, with the movie books and with Royal Arch, I'm constantly have to watch the movies and footnote and do research, where the fiction, you can just, write whatever you want. And, you don't have to worry about footnoting it or anything like that. And you can create something. And yeah, it's a great experience. I loved writing A Pact with the Devil. And I loved it so much so that I'm working on its sequel, and I'm actually working on some backstories with it as well.
Yes, well, this is my first foray into it, and, it's difficult for me because when I worked in radio, Robert, I was used to writing everything in about 8 to 10 lines on a notepad, because that equaled out to about 30 seconds of radio. So now to have the ability to expand on everything, it is different, man. And, you have to train yourself to write differently, that you have to express. You have to always keep in mind to paint that picture, right. And that is the tough part. It's kind of like doing radio here, where, because we don't have a camera on you or me, and we're not showing slides, photos, or videos, we have to paint that picture. So that is something that, I am having a lot of fun with, and I'll tell you, what an experience this has been. I don't know if it'll ever get published or not. I'm doing it for me just to say I've done it.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely an experience. You could definitely get it published. That's up to you, of course. But you could definitely get it published through self-publishing, and that's really a great advantage right now. Assuming you didn't want to go the traditional way. I always found that when I was writing fiction, or my works of fiction, or the one that was out, it was a balancing act between. I agree with you. You want to paint a picture, but also you have to caveat that or balance it with. You want the writer the reader to be able to use their own imagination. Also, you don't want to, describe everything. You want to have, the reader be engaged and want to be able to imagine things as well. So it is a balancing act with that. But yeah, no, writing fiction is great. I loved it. I loved writing A Pact with the Devil. And like I said, I loved it so much so that I'm actually right now working on its sequel and some backstories to it. So, good luck with it. And if you need any advice or pointers, shoot me an email. I'd love to help you out if you needed it, of course.
Always, my friend. I'm always seeking advice. That's how you make it good the first time. You know what I'm saying? I think you have to do something like that. You have to, indeed. So, with everything, you are known as a real one of the great researchers of the occult and of Hollywood. What you've seen from Hollywood in the last number of months here, since you were on the air last, and we talked about Masonry last time you were on. But we're going to focus on Hollywood a lot tonight, because what a mess Hollywood is right now. Did you see this coming?
No, I did not. I look at the movies and the symbolism that I break down. I think it's really, really fascinating. I don't really assign so much a sinister agenda to it. I guess that's part of it, but of course you're right. Hollywood certainly does have a very dark side to it. I mean, as you mentioned with Harvey Weinstein and a lot going on out there and things like that. But with the movie stuff, with the movie symbolism, I can tell you it's been going on. The use of esoteric and occult imagery in films and undercurrents and themes has been going on since its inception. And you can go back to day one with this. This is not a modern invention. You can literally go back to movies such as Metropolis, and even in the 30s, the horror movies of Universal, and into, the Wizard of Oz, and into the 50s with the science fiction films. And then, of course, you get into the 60s. I mean, it's been going on since day one. I mean, it goes back in time. I mean, you get into the works of, people even like William Shakespeare, has the occult and ghosts and witches and things like that. And, certainly even, the operas of Mozart, think of the Magic Flute, very Masonic and Illuministic, and, even the works of Richard Wagner, the great German composer, are laden with esoteric mythology and things like that. So this has been happening for quite some time. So for, in the entertainment field, I suppose, you want to say the music industry, I guess. So this is not anything that Hollywood would be immune to or anything like that. And certainly depending on the level of sophistication of the filmmaker, the director, or writers, I mean, you have some real movies that are just really overloaded with it. And you have some, that are not. And movies that do not have it are not necessarily bad or unwatchable. It just means they don't have it in it. And the one movie that came out in the last 6 months, it didn't really do well in the box office, but it's one of those real interesting movies because the whole movie itself is a symbol. And it also has symbolism in it. Was this movie that was released over the fall of last year. It was called Mother, with Jennifer Lawrence and Javier Bardem, two Oscar winners. And it didn't really do well at the box office. So if you watch it, I could see where someone may not like it or follow it or kind of get it. It is sort of an intense film, but it's it's symbolic. The whole thing is just allegorical. I mean, it's not a literal film. So that was one that came out, and I know that there are some that have been released recently. I haven't seen it yet. I want to see The Last Jedi. If it's anything like the Balance of the Force, episode 7, I know that'll have some stuff in it. And then the one that just won the Best Picture movie, The Shape of Water, That's Guillermo del Toro, and his movies are generally symbolic. In fact, the one movie that he released a couple years ago, Crimson Peak, was overloaded. Well, was filled with esoteric themes and occult ideas and imagery and things like that. So that's one that I have on my to watch list. So yeah, it's a deep study. I've written 2 books about it, and the books really do cover a whole wide range of genres and films in both of them. And it's really, Dave, when I was writing the first one, there was movies I wanted to talk about, but the book would have gone on and on and on. So I thought, okay, well, let me stop, and I'll put these in Cinema Symbolism 2. So then I wrote Cinema Symbolism 2, and when I was doing that, the same thing occurred where I was writing and I thought to myself, well, there's movies I want to talk about, but I can't fit them all in this one. So I'll start outlining Cinema Symbolism 3, which is one of the books I'm currently writing right now, actually.
When you look at Hollywood, and I want to talk just for a moment here of what is going on with so many people out there trying to expose the darker sides of it, the ties to Scientology, the ties to sexism, Harvey Weinstein, and some of the piggish behavior that he was creating. Basically, you want this role, you have to sleep with me or sleep with somebody else. Sure. or do all that sort of stuff. That is what we're seeing coming out. We always saw in B or C or D rated type movies, or even, pornography type movies, where that type of attitude, oh, you want that role? Well, I need a favor back. And here it is coming very true. And some of the biggest stars are now brave enough to come out and say it's happening to them. It's not the washed up movie stars like Randy Quaid or Corey Feldman who are doing this. We have big names coming through. Was this a bubble that you felt was bound to burst?
I suppose so. It probably was. The legend of the casting couch has been around forever. And even if you watch a movie like Mulholland Drive, by David Lynch, when they go into the guy who's sort of the Illuminati, Hollywood puppet master, Mr. Roke, I believe it is, in Mulholland Drive, you have the couch next to his, desk, kind of implying the casting couch. I thought that was interesting. So this has been rumored for quite some time. And, it's not surprising to really learn that something like this was actually going on. It isn't surprising to me. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It is very dark, and it is unfortunate. But you get people like Harvey Weinstein and people like that. It is unfortunate, but I guess kind of in the back of your head, you always kind of suspected something like this was going on, and it's kind of good to see. I think some light shined in on this. Hopefully, this will get it to stop, and you can get people to disengaging this sort of behavior. I mean, it's not good. It's not healthy. It's very destructive, quite obviously. And I think it's long overdue, when it comes to behavior, such as that going on. So yeah, that's my take on it. And I do believe, with the advent of social media, with the internet's, obviously 20 years old. I remember, first getting online in the late 90s. But it really was obviously still in its infancy, and it wasn't until you get the mid-2000s with social media, and now with it really proliferating, it's not surprising with the advent of all this, something like this, was eventually going to be exposed. I mean, it's just amazing the amount of information that now it's quite literally available at the click of a fingertip. So yeah, for me, for this going on, it's not at all surprising. It's very unfortunate. And hopefully Hollywood will learn a lesson and clean up its act. I don't know if they will or not. We'll see.
Do you think they can, though, or are they too far deep into it? Because that's the way it always seems to go with these things, is once that bubble bursts, we all look for solutions, but this only solution seems to be going back to what was working. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do follow the question. I don't know. Is Hollywood, it can't help itself. It's very possible. I look at Hollywood right now, and just the political discourse is just outrageous to me. Coming out of that place right now. I mean, it's silly. I mean, it's not even necessary. I mean, I don't know as an actor or an actress. I mean, and Jennifer Lawrence has been, her last two movies, the Mother movie we talked about, and the one she just released, Red Sparrow, they both kind of tanked. And it's like, why would you want to, engage in some really, heated political diatribe before your movie's being released, where you're going to only exile half your audience? I mean, it doesn't make sense. I mean, I have political views as well, but, I kind of try to, keep it off my social media. I kind of try to keep it to myself, by and large. I mean, I don't want people, not buying my books based on what political affiliation I have. Not that they should anyway. I mean, my books are completely apolitical anyway, but, it just seems Hollywood is so politicized right now, more than I ever remembered it. I mean, whether it was a Democratic administration or Republican, I mean, I've never seen it like this. And I just think I just think it's completely outrageous. And you just see these movies that are being made and they don't do as well. Or you just saw the thing with the Oscars just being on and the ratings on that tanked. And it's just, do what you're, make the movies, do what you're good at, make them entertaining and people will watch, and so that you can have political views. It's, and you even hear actors say it. I mean, I remember listening to an interview with Kevin Hart, and he was saying, I'm not going to insult, I mean, it's, political lampoonery and things like that. I mean, that's all fair game. I don't, no one begrudges something like that, or comedy or anything like that. But I mean, some of it has become really vicious coming out of Hollywood. And I remember Kevin Hart said, the actor, he said, I will never engage in that. And I mean, he was wise. He said, I will never engage in that because I don't want to, upset half my audience. I want my movies to do well. I want as many people sitting in the box office as possible, in the movie theater as possible, and have the box office do as well as possible. And as a writer and someone who promotes things and promotes his books, I certainly can relate to that. I mean, what political party or affiliation I have is completely irrelevant. I mean, yeah, I might engage in a retweet or something like that on Twitter, which is pretty harmless. But I mean, I would really, by and large, I mean, I've done it once in a while. I guess I can never help myself. But by and large, I mean, 99% of my tweets are completely apolitical. I stay out of it, when I'm promoting my books. And certainly I don't want to exile somebody and say, oh, hey, this guy supports this candidate, or this guy voted for this guy, or this, Robert Sullivan follows this political person on Twitter. I'm not going to buy his books. I mean, by all means, don't do that. My books are for everybody, whatever your political affiliation is. If you're religion, Christian, Jew, Muslim, atheist, right wing, left wing, I don't care. Buy my books. You're going to like them, and I would never, ever do something, to try to, ostracize or alienate a particular audience. And Hollywood right now, and at least in my opinion, seems to be really keen on doing that. I'm not sure why. I think it's really stupid. And, whether they learn from it or, try to back off of it, we'll see. Or if they double down, I guess only time will tell.
Do you believe then that the Oscars, and I know as we look at Hollywood, and we're not going to go too deep into this because that's not what the show is about, but with the way the ratings dropped, it was only the second time, I believe, in history that the Oscars audience dropped below 30 million people viewing. This one, a record low at 22 million. Do you think that had to do with the political climate where people were just like, oh, now I'm going to hear all these movie stars give us their political ramblings in their speeches that go on for 35 minutes instead of talking about their movie, and I'm just done with that?
Absolutely. No doubt about it. That is absolutely why people tuned it out. I didn't watch it. I didn't watch it for that very reason, because I don't want to listen to a political diatribe from an actor or an actress. Talk about the movie and talk about their inspiration. That's fine like that. They can have political views. That's fine as well. No one's saying they can't, but what makes it obnoxious with these, speeches in Hollywood is, at the award shows is they know they have the audience. They have the audience not only literally in the theater, in the audience, the actual people sitting there in the theater watching them, but they know they have the cameras on. And that's why they do it. That's why they do it. I remember whenever it was last year or whatever, I think it was Meryl Streep went on a diatribe. And, the truth of the matter is that's fine. She has First Amendment rights, and, no one's saying she doesn't, but she's doing that because the audience is on. She has access to the audience. I mean, Meryl Streep can take out a front page article in the New York Times or the Washington Post and write an editorial or an advertisement about her political views. She could create a YouTube video about it. She can get on Twitter and tweet about it. She can go on Facebook and post something. She could create a website and post her political views. She doesn't do that because she knows no one would pay attention to it. It's akin to taking a knee at a sporting event. Everyone's watching. If they held a rally at a park about about why they don't like the country, no one would pay attention to it, and no one would attend. They do that because the cameras are on, and it's the same thing. Meryl Streep can call a press conference. No one would show up. No one would care. They're doing this because the cameras are on. That's what makes it, in my opinion, a little obnoxious. Again, they have First Amendment rights. No one's saying they don't. No one's saying they can't have political views. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there's a time and place for it, and award shows and sporting events is not the time or place for it. And it's definitely why people were tuning it out. No one wants to watch an award show and be bombarded with political diatribe. If you went into just hypothetically, I mean, I'll give you just I'll end on this example. I mean, if you went into a movie theater, let's say, and you bought a ticket to watch a movie, whatever that movie may be, let's just say the Star Wars movie or something, it could be any movie. And you go into the theater and you buy your popcorn and soda and snow caps, and you're sitting there watching the film, and right before the film comes out, comes on, the manager of the movie theater came out and said, well, before we start this movie, I want to give you a 10-minute lecture on what political candidate I'm voting for, and which one you should vote for or which one you should vote against. You would think this guy was stark raving mad. I mean, you'd be, this isn't what I'm here for. I didn't buy a ticket to listen to this guy. So that's what it's akin to me in Hollywood. Whether they'll stop or not, we'll see, or whether they double down or not, we'll see. But yeah, the ratings on the Oscars were very low, and I know that's why people were tuning it out.
But you know what? You can even go as far as the symbolism towards racism, culture in the Super Bowl, where every year they seem to get in trouble during the halftime show with these pop artists, yet all of these hard rock heavy metal / bands who would love to do the Super Bowl, like Metallica, when it was in San Francisco, their hometown, they were told, no, we can't have any of that. But in the meantime, we see all of this political posturing during the Super Bowl now, and it's getting ridiculous, and the Super Bowl even took a dip in ratings this year. Is it all a matter of, like Hollywood, people are just fed up with being fed what they don't want to hear, no matter what side of the political spectrum they lie on?
Well, I think that's part of it, sure. I mean, if you want to watch a movie for entertainment purposes, that's all ultimately, why you watch a movie is to be entertained by it. For me, when I watch it, it's not only that, but to try to find these esoteric undercurrents in these films, which is just a really, fascinating, deep study for me. And I love doing it. I keep them set. I don't, when it comes to the political stuff, I mean, like I said, I don't watch a movie for a political discourse. I don't think most people do. And when I'm doing the analysis with the occultism and the, hidden themes in the films, I've never really, I mean, you have hidden political allegories occasionally in a film like The Wizard of Oz or something, but I've never found really, in these films. I mean, you can have, like movements and things like that being allegorized and whatever, but the occultism in these films is much more like, alchemical, mythological, ancient religions, archetypal imagery, things like that. It's not necessarily political. I mean, in some instances it is, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is the scandal and political, the politicizing going on in Hollywood. I don't know if I really see a nexus to that in the esoteric imagery going on inside films. Although you will find it from time to time. I'm not saying you won't, but it's more the exception than it is the rule. So yeah, I mean, with Hollywood, I mean, with what's going on out there, I mean, only time will tell us if they back off, or, if they want to double down. But, when I watch a movie, and I don't want to speak for everybody, ultimately my motivation for watching the movie is to be entertained, not to listen to political, a diatribe. So that's my take on it.
It is interesting, though, because this is one of those, instant forest fire type topics. The way everything is being politicized these days throughout social media, it ties into Hollywood, ties into everything. At what point does Hollywood, in your opinion, have to take a step back and say, you know what, we got to get back to concentrating on making some movies, because our movies have been mediocre over the years. We're not making the profits because the movie theaters are jacking up their prices way too high over the last 20 plus years. And in reality, let's face it, the numbers on, from what I was reading, I guess what I'm trying to say is what I was reading leading up into this Oscars is none of these films 10 years ago would have been Oscar worthy compared to the movies back then.
Yeah, what makes a movie Oscar worthy? It's very interesting. They always shy away from the blockbuster. They give the blockbuster movie the minor awards, like photography or music or something like that. By and large, the movies that are released for Best Picture, you do get it occasionally, are these very artistic films. And this is what Hollywood views itself as, this artistic medium. And they really like the artistic movies, the deep movies, the action shoot 'em up blockbuster that seldom gets nominated. And if it does, it's usually symbolic. It seldom wins. Me personally, I remember back when I was a child, even growing up, you take a look at some of the movies that have won Best Picture in the years they released. I think it was like 80, 81, or 82. One of the movies that won Best Picture was this movie called Chariots of Fire. It's about track runners at Cambridge University in Edwardian, England. And it's a snooze fest. You can't sit through 10 minutes of it. It's terrible. It's well acted. It's not a bad movie. It's just boring. I think it bored me to tears. You compare that to something like Raiders of the Lost Ark, which was just fantastic, very engaging, fantastic storyline, well performed, gets really nominated for nothing. But Chariots of Fire is this, artistic, over the top, slow moving, artistic, cinematic, film. It's just, that's what wins Best Picture. So, Hollywood has always done this. The movie that is the most artistic seems to win, not necessarily the one that is the most entertaining. And they seem to, that's been going on for years. Something like Star Wars, the first Star Wars movie, back in 1977 when it came out, that was groundbreaking. I think that was, did get nominated, but it didn't win. I think to this day, it's 2018 and only one horror movie, I believe, has been nominated for Best Picture. All these years, 90 years of Oscar, and only one horror movie has been nominated for Best Picture, which was The Exorcist. And that didn't win. If The Exorcist can't win Best Picture, what the hell can? Hollywood should definitely get back to making movies, doing what they do best. And just, keep on the political discourse to a minimal, keep it down, and your movies will do just fine. Movies that stay away from this do well. You had the movie that came out, the Star Wars movies, they do well. They're political, those people in those keep to themselves. They had the movie the big blockbuster here in the United States, over the winter, back in December, was the Jumanji movie, which I haven't seen yet. But all the people who were in that, The Rock, and again, Kevin Hart and Jack Black and that coterie, they remained politically neutral. They didn't get involved with it. And, what do you know? The movie made a ton of money. There's your lesson for you. Keep your politics to yourself and your movie will make a ton of money. That movie made a fortune here. So hopefully Hollywood will learn from this. Only time will tell. But, as far as Robert W. Sullivan IV is concerned, I'm a big cinephile. I love movies. Go back to doing what you do best and make great movies, contain some hidden, imagery in them, and let me dissect it, and all will be right with the world.
Well, let's get into the symbology of Hollywood movies, because there's a lot hidden behind the scenes that the majority of people do not know what is out there. So for our audience who maybe doesn't understand what the whole symbology of film means, maybe you could go over that.
Yeah, well, let's just start with like a bit of a primer, I guess. As growing up as a kid, and I've always been fascinated with movies. I just love watching quality movies. Movies that I was born in 1971, and this was pre-cable TV. This is obviously pre-internet, Netflix, all that. This is even the era of video. So if you wanted to watch a movie, you were pretty much kind of stuck with when it came on television. Or going to see it in the theater. And if a movie had already run, it was basically you had to wait for it to come on, just on TV, a UHF channel or something. So I remember, growing up watching, shows on UHF channels. I just was always impressed with, there was a television show here in Baltimore, Maryland called Ghost Host. And I just remember watching all the old Universal horror films, with Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff and Lon Chaney, movies like, Dracula, Frankenstein, The Wolfman. And even the monster rally movies like Frankenstein meets Wolfman, and The Raven and The Black Cat, movies like that. And then they would also show from the 60s the Vincent Price AIP horror movies such as like Pit and the Pendulum and Mask and the Red Death. And I always got hooked on those as a kid. I just loved that genre, loved horror. And then in the 70s, probably more in the late 70s, I remember watching for the first time The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the spaghetti western, and my God, I just thought that was the greatest thing ever. And then, of course, I saw Star Wars in 1977, and it just started probably with Star Wars when I watched it. It was probably in the mid 80s. This was probably after Empire and Return of the Jedi came out. I remember hearing an interview with George Lucas, and he was talking about his inspiration for Star Wars, and this was something I was interested in. I wanted to know more about this, and he said one of the things that I modeled this movie was a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces by a man named Joseph Campbell. And that just stuck with me. And I thought, oh, wow, that's really interesting. I don't know what that is or who that is, but I kind of made a mental note of it. And I thought, still in high school, I thought I'll have to start looking into this, when I get time. And this, at some point in time, it just happened. I started looking at this book by Joseph Campbell, and it was about comparative mythology and how in these mythologies coming out of the ancient world, there were these themes and interactions and archetypal imagery that just kept repeating over and over again. I thought, and you can identify it in Star Wars. You'd have like, the hermit figure who helps the hero out and gives him information, and the transmitting of the supernatural relic, which in Star Wars is the lightsaber when Kenobi gives Luke Skywalker and the lightsaber. I thought, oh, this is really interesting. And I started just delving into this more and more. And as this was happening, I started writing the Royal Arch of Enoch and was becoming more and more familiar with symbolism and the occult and secret societies and ancient religions. And, as I was writing Royal Arch of Enoch, I started seeing more and more and being much more attuned and applying this wisdom to when I was watching movies and seeing mythology and the Bible and archetypes and, even things coming out of the world of Freemasonry turning up in film. And I thought this was just so fascinating. And it was one of those things, Dave, when I was doing this, when I watched these movies, it was watching them over and over again because I wanted to make sure that I was actually seeing what I believed I was seeing. I didn't want to make it, that this was a coincidence or anything. And it really was this, 20-year, application of writing the Royal Arch of Enoch, my first book. I know we talked about this at the last time I was on. But when I got done the Royal Arch of Enoch, the last chapter in that book dealt with what I would call Masonic and Enochian and sort of solar symbolism in film. And this fascinated me. And you took a movie like the National Treasure film with Nicolas Cage. That's actually a Masonic ritual on screen. It's actually a retelling of the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial. And I was just fascinated by this. And I turned literally this 20 years of writing and research of the Royal Arch onto Hollywood. And as soon as Royal Arch of Enoch came out, I started the first movie book, Cinema Symbolism, which dealt with this very, arcane imagery turning up in film. And as I was writing that, there was other movies I wanted to talk about. And like I said, that ultimately became Cinema Symbolism 2. But in the first book, Some of the movies I delved into was the Star Wars movies, all 6 of them. Those are overloaded with all sorts of mythological themes, comparative religion. Very fascinating study. You have an ancient theology known as Gnosticism. This turns up in cinema all the time. The Matrix movies are really a great prime example of where to see this turn up. But you'll see the Gnostic themes overshadow movies such as Fight Club, The Truman Show, this movie that just came out with Jennifer Lawrence called Mother, has Gnostic themes in it. I got into the Lord of the Rings movies. This was, again, a study with this, Joseph Campbell monomyth. Movies such as The Exorcist, the great horror movie. This, again, has a lot of what I would call Manichaean symbolism, light versus dark, going on in this. It's a very symbolic movie. It's very well done. It's very subtle, in that movie. So this was the movie with another Aronofsky movie, Black Swan, was one I took on. And then I continued this on with cinema symbolism too, again with like Harry Potter, the spaghetti Western movies of Sergio Leone, which are very biblical, have a lot of religious themes going on. This was just something that just fascinated me. And I just loved writing about this and researching it and watching these movies. And just this whole idea is, were these filmmakers trying to tell me something on a deeper level? And many times they are. And some filmmakers are much more sophisticated with it than others. Some are very adroit. Some are very clever. And it really does feel at times, Dave, when I'm watching these films, I've said this on other shows, so I'll say it here, that it's like it's akin to playing a game of chess against Bobby Fischer. It's a challenge to see if, I feel like these filmmakers are challenging the audience to see if the audience are smart enough and wise enough to pick up on these very occult and esoteric iconographies going on in these films, to see if the audience is adroit enough to see what's going on beneath the surface of just the mere story of the film. It's fascinating. And I'll just end on this. It really is incredible in some instances, the levels that story makers and filmmakers will go to convey hidden meanings in movies. It's never ending. When you think you've got to figure it out, I mean, it can be a piece of music that they use. It can actually be the casting of an actor and actress. The actual presence of an actor and actress can be employed for occult purposes. I mean, you get into costuming, numbers. I mean, all this plays into this. And it's just such a deep, intense study. And I've written 2 books about it, and I've got a 3rd on the way. And I was just commenting on Twitter the other day. I'm thinking Cinema Symbolism 3 may be my first book that actually exceeds 1,000 pages. We'll see, because it's just such a deep, intense study. But I love doing it. So.
Canadian Joe on Twitter at hashtag Spaced Out Radio says, could you give a few examples of this symbolism that you're finding in these films?
Oh, of course. Sure. I mean, where do you want to start? Let's get into let's get into some of this. Well, we can get into. I mean, we get into esoteric themes and iconography. We'll go over a genre of movies. We can get into The Exorcist. You have a whole interplay in that movie of light versus dark, the demon versus the sun priest, the Jesuits. The symbol of the Jesuits is the sun. It's light versus dark. Even at the very beginning of the movie, where the Jesuit priest, played by Max von Sydow, is confronting the demon, you have the setting sun in the background. It's the death of light. It's the coming darkness. That's very well played to the subconscious mind. And then you move to Georgetown, where the little girl is about to be possessed by the demon. You have the scene right off the bat. This is very clever. And this is done more than once in film, where the mother, Chris McNeil, this is Ellen Bernstein, is walking home from the from the movie shoot, and she gets accosted by the trick-or-treaters. That's very subconscious. That is the filmmaker way of telling you that it is Halloween. Halloween on October 31st is the halfway delineation mark between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice. And this is when the days and the light become officially really diminish and becomes shorter, and is the celebration of darkness. That's what Halloween is. So now we have the death of light, the death of godly divine light, and the forthcoming darkness. just symbolically implanted in your mind by the presence of trick-or-treaters, subconsciously telling your mind that it's the forthcoming darkness, it's the darkest time of the year, it's the death of light. And of course, the darkness is the demon, quite literally, who is now given license to terrorize the Dahlgren Chapel there on Georgetown University and deface the statue of the Virgin Mary, and then eventually take possession of the little girl. You have, when the girl becomes possessed, you'll pay attention that the room becomes frigid, freezing. You can see your breath. This comes out of the world of Dante Alighieri's Inferno, the Divine Comedy, where the lowest rung of hell is frigid, is freezing. And that's where the worst demons were down there. So you have that being drawn upon. You have the entire figure of Father Karras, the other Jesuit priest, as the Christ Savior figure of the little girl. This was very cleverly done. If you pay attention to the movie, he is constantly in a state of ascension. He is generally seen going up staircases or walking upwards, ascending, a heavenly ascent. In fact, when he first appears on the screen, and this is, again, very clever, this is very well hidden, he is ascending, he's walking up a flight of steps to a subway platform, and he's actually coming up from 33rd Street, of all things, and that is a Christ reference. That is a reference to the 33 years that Jesus was on earth. Jesus was crucified at age 33. So we have the investing of Karras as the Christ Redeemer figure, the Savior figure of the little girl. But then if you watch the movie, he's always questioning his own faith, and that's symbolized at the end when he falls down the flight of steps. He actually tumbles downward, dying, and we are symbolically told, we know that the exorcism was successful because at the end of the movie, when he's laying there dying at the bottom of the steps, you'll see the words, you'll see the word pigs spray painted on the wall next to him. And that's a reference to the New Testament tale where Jesus exorcised a demon and cast it into a herd of pigs, and then had the pigs go off a cliff dying. That's how he got rid of the demon. The demon was called Legion. So that was a very esoteric reference to tell you that, hey, we know that the exorcism was a success. And then getting back to the one that was great was with the Halloween reference, the coming darkness. This was actually replayed years later. And again, it's just the length these guys go to do this. This was actually replayed in the movie The Shining by Stanley Kubrick, which is just overloaded. I mean, my goodness gracious, with all kind of double themes and repetition going on. We can get into that in a little bit. But if you're watching The Shining, pay attention to when Jack Torrance is being interviewed by Ullman there at the beginning. Ullman tells him, he says, well, I believe he says something to the effect of our operating hours, our operating time of years, I believe, through mid-May to October 30th. That date is specifically given. He said, that's our last day of operation. And then you have, later Jack gets the job, and then he's taking his family to the hotel. When the check-in date, that's when everyone's leaving. That's when all the staff is packing up. We know that's Halloween. The last day of operation, everyone's gone, is on October 30th. So the Torrances arrive at the Overlook on Halloween. That's very, very cleverly done by Kubrick to implant this again into your subconscious mind, because, again, it's the idea of the coming darkness, the coming winter months, the death of light, the celebration of darkness, which is what Halloween is, Samhain, Samhain. Better pronounced that way. And this is exactly what happens in The Shining. It gives license to all the ghosts and the demons to haunt and torment the Torrance family in the Overlook Hotel. So it's these very subtle little hints and nuances that these filmmakers really like to play around with, in your subconscious mind, and they put it on screen. The one thing that I'm very, when I'm doing this, that is very, that has to be stressed when doing this dissection of these movies is the context or the surrounding circumstances as how this is presented, or how a symbol or a theme or image can be presented, because the context is key. Something presented one way in one film may have meaning, but presented another way in another film may have another esoteric interpretation to it. So the context is critical to doing this. But it's, I wrote 2 books about it. And, I certainly, have no problem discussing it. But it is. I mean, there's just some more examples. There's just a couple examples. And if you want some more, I can give you some more. We can get into The Shining. You tell me.
Well, let's follow up with another question from Canadian Joe, excuse me, on Twitter. He's saying the 33 that you mentioned about Jesus, could that not also be symbolic for Freemasonry with 33-degree Masons?
It depends on the context. In the context of the Exorcist, it is a clear reference to Jesus because you have Charis as the Christ figure who is going to be the savior of the little girl. It could be Masonic, but in that surrounding context, it would not be. You have to look at the surrounding circumstances of the movie as how the number or the symbol is presented. So in that context, the number 33 is a Christ reference, but you may see it in another movie where it would be a Masonic reference. Again, the context is the key. Discovering the context of the film and what it's going on. And obviously, The Exorcist is a deep religious movie, the struggle of Christianity versus demonism. That is a clear reference to Jesus Christ and is not Masonic in that context, but it could be Masonic, in another context. A great example of this, we'll stick with The Exorcist, is the number 88, where Chris McNeil, the mother, is in the Barringer Clinic, and you're going to want to pay attention to this. This is, again, very well hidden. When the doctors are studying the little girl and they're at a loss for what's wrong with her, and this is when she's becoming really now she's becoming possessed by the demon, and they don't know what the hell's wrong with her, no pun intended. They have Chris McNeil in the Barringer Clinic. Pay attention to when they're talking to her. The replication of the scene is the Last Supper painting by Leonardo da Vinci. You have Chris McNeil, Christ, sitting at the head of the table, surrounded by 4 groups of 3 doctors. It's a complete replication of the Last Supper painting, and that's intentionally done because this is where the doctor, for the first time, tells her that a secular medical cure is not going to do your daughter any good. He says they need a spiritual cure. They need an exorcism. And Friedkin, the director, is intentionally conjuring Jesus Christ and the Last Supper painting in that scene to subconsciously bombard your mind with that a spiritual cure is needed for the little girl. This is carried forward with the mother actually uses a fascinating number here. She says something to the effect of, I won't repeat it because I'll keep it listener friendly. I don't want to curse over the airways. She says something to the effect of, there's 88 doctors here and no one can help me. Fascinating use of the number 88 there. In Greek gematria, 888 is the number for Jesus Christ. So here we have Chris McNeil once again evoking Jesus Christ in a scene that is a replication of the Last Supper. So the number 33 with Charis is a clear Christ reference, not Masonic. But take the number 88. Well, we go forward to a movie that was released in the mid-'80s called Back to the Future. And the number 88 appears all over the place with this thing. It's the mileage that the space-time continuum on the car has to be breached in order to activate the flux capacitor and activate time travel. The number 88, and specifically the number of the date of the hour of when the lightning strikes the clock tower, which is 10:04, are interrelated. They have nothing to do with Jesus Christ or religion in the Back to the Future movie, but they have symbolic underlying contextual meaning in Back to the Future. That number 88 and the 10:04 has meaning, but it's different than it is in The Exorcist. So when you're doing this study, you have to really pay attention to the context of what the number or the symbol is presented, because it can mean it can have one esoteric meaning in a movie, yet have another esoteric meaning in another movie. The context will tell you everything of what the filmmaker is trying to have you interpret by presenting surrounding circumstances. That is key to deciphering this esoteric imagery that is going on inside a film.
We have about 2 minutes left with you, and if we got to carry this question over, that's just fine. But this one comes from Tripp. He is asking, Robert, is the symbolism you're talking about, or is it just how the writers, screenplayers, producers, directors want things to be? Or could you be reading into it just a little too much?
No. These guys love implanting this esoteric imagery into films. There's too much evidence of it. I've seen way too much evidence for this to be a coincidence. That there's no way that that this is just happening by happenstance. It's just not possible. I've just seen way too much, examples of this. And these guys are experts at this. I mean, Darren Aronofsky loves doing this. Stanley Kubrick was a master at this. And it's for them. It's akin to, if I start talking too long, Dave, just cut me off and I'll continue after the break. It's akin to incorporating this esoteric imagery in film is akin to an architect or a city planner placing sacred geometry into a building or cityscape. It invests just as, in a church you have sacred ratios, the Vesica Pisces, the golden ratio, and it's transforming the building into a divine masterpiece where divinity dwells. It's the same thing with this esoteric imagery. It's transforming celluloid and a movie into a masterpiece, into a sublime work of art. It's really what these guys view themselves doing is creating modern day mythology. And by using this esoteric imagery, it's transforming the movie into something more than just literally a movie. It's transforming it into mythology. It's not a coincidence. I've seen way too much examples of it. Many a time these guys admit to doing it. I mean, Aronofsky does it all over the place in Mother. He does it all over the place in Black Swan. Stanley Kubrick, I mean, my goodness gracious, the lengths he goes to in The Shining to show doubles and repetition. We can get into that after the break. That's astounding. That's astounding. But no, it's not a coincidence. I've seen way too many examples of it for it to be, and it's a fascinating study. It's definitely going on. I'm 100% convinced of it. I have no problem presenting this as a lawyer to a judge and jury. I'll put it to you like that.
Well, and I trust you on that one. And on that note, we're going to take our first break of the night. Robert W. Sullivan IV is our guest tonight. We're talking Hollywood, Easter eggs, the occult, esoteric mentions of the strange and odd that most of us don't even see or understand while watching a film. It's going to be another 2 hours of this fascinating conversation with Robert. Really appreciate him coming in. We'll be back with more Spaced Out Radio right after this.
Find your escape where time has no limits. It's about living today and cherishing the heritage of yesterday. A spirit of adventure for what is new, with the nostalgia of the past. Your timepiece is a reflection of who you are. Life surrounded by beauty from the world around us to the soul within. EscapeWatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
Lorian Fenton here, SOR listeners. Join me at UFOCon 2018 in South San Francisco, California, March 23rd through 25th, where 14 presenters discuss all things disclosure, UFOs, and aliens. Stephen Bassett, Grant Cameron, and Melinda Leslie address disclosure. Preston Dennett will present Inside UFOs. Your Dave Scott and Lynn Buchanan tell of amazing alien contact. Get tickets at caufocon.com.
The freedom to post what you want, when you want. That's the social media freedom you need. Social Media Freedom is the free app in your app store. No need to worry about going to jail or being shadow banned any longer. It's the freedom to say what you feel. The freedom to know Big Brother isn't watching. It's the way social media is supposed to be. Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free. Download from your app store today.
Coming September 28th to the 30th, it's our first annual Caribou Paracon, put on by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. 3 days of paranormal, supernatural, and spiritual knowledge in the beautiful 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Tickets are $150 Canadian for the event, being held at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Come watch our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Lorian Fenton, David Weatherly, Ross Allison, and more. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
Hey Space Travelers, it's Joe Roop, your host of Spaced Out Saturdays. Come join me as we explore the realms of the paranormal, the esoteric, and everything in between every Saturday night at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. You know the truth is out there. Don't get caught sleepwalking. Come join Spaced Out Saturdays. That's every Saturday night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, right here on spacedoutradio.com.
Psychic Sundays, spiritual communication, ET contact, Sasquatch in your backyard. We will have it all on Cosmic Passport with me, Elizabeth Anglin. Each Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at spacedoutradio.com, I will take you on a journey of enlightenment. The goal is learning from the soul on out. We'd love it if you joined our experience. Cosmic Passport, heard Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
365 days a year, we're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at ufoseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over the Spaced Out Radio night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, this is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruiz, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at spacedoutradio.com.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Do you want to know what's really going on in your world? Do you have questions about who you can trust in the mainstream media? Then look no further than the Rebel Planet. Come get the straight answers right here at spacedoutradio.com. Join me, Jamie Sexton, creator of Rebel Planet News, as I fill you in on the stories behind the stories. All you truth seekers, be sure to tune in to Rebel Planet on spacedoutradio.com the third Thursday of every month.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back for hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio. Tonight, I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, author Sheila Renee Parker is going to join us. We are going to be talking witches and spells. Tomorrow night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live on The Fringe FM, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to revolution.radio and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Nemidocoptiasis is your password. Now, use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect live with me during the show as well. We are live on Periscope.tv, as we are every Monday through Friday night. We are also on Facebook. Give our page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. I would appreciate that. We are on iHeartRadio in the United States. TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. Rock out to some Bumblefoot. Shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. Read The Encounter online, our news section, or watch great videos like from UFO Seekers, Contact TV, and so much more. Tonight we are talking movie symbolism and Easter eggs. Our expert tonight, second time on the show, Robert W. Sullivan IV. We really appreciate Rob coming on into tonight's show. He's just an encyclopedia of information when it comes to the esoteric and the occult. I don't know how you do it, Rob. Where do you find time between all of this studying and being a full-time lawyer as well?
Oh, it's there. It's there. It is time-consuming. It's just, you turn around, you wake up, and then you turn around, and it's, nighttime. I mean, it does go by quickly. What's good is I've done a lot of this research and reading. I mean, I'm always reading and looking into new material, of course, but there is an era of, I have a, familiarity with this from reading a lot of books, which I have in my past, so, that's key to this is, understanding the occult, the esoteric symbolism. And again, it's proper context because that's key. And when it comes to decoding these films, again, it's really, that's the starting point is what kind of film am I, what if anything, I mean, like I said, not all films have this, what's the underlying theme or imagery, am I dealing with Kabbalah, or archetypes or alchemy, secret societies, the monomyth, Gnosticism. That's really key. Once that starts to fall in line, then the other symbolism that dovetails this is much easier, at least for me to pick up on. But no, it is time consuming, but it's what I love doing. And, it fascinates me, and it's just something I love doing and writing about, and then coming on shows like this to talk about. Something I really like doing.
Well, right during the break, we were kind of talking about the fact that the majority of people who, and I put myself in this category, who watch movies, we're not looking for that symbolism. It's way over our heads. We just want to watch a good movie and kill about, 90 minutes to 2 hours of our life with some quality entertainment. Sometimes we're robbed of that, especially if you watch a Pauly Shore type movie or anything along those lines. But right. The whole point being is, when we dedicate time, it's a getaway. When did you start looking into the behind the scenes and noticing all of this, or did it just jump out at you?
No, there was a time when I watched a movie where I didn't pick up on any of this stuff, but like you said, I really wasn't looking for it. It started for me really it started for me really with probably in the mid 80s, late 80s, early 90s with the Star Wars films, because they had such an impact on me growing up. I mean, I literally grew up on them. I mean, I was born in 71, and I think the first one came out in 77. So they had a tremendous impact on me. And, just the whole idea with those movies of, the monomyth of Joseph Campbell with comparative religion, that's where I realized, that there was more to this than just, an action adventure space opera, basically, that this was coming out of the ancient world. Now, granted, the Star Wars movies were set, in outer space in the future, or where are they? You think to yourself, these are futuristic. Are they? Are these, what does it say at the beginning? A long time ago, right? So it's mythology, seemingly. So that's where it kind of all started. And then really when for me, Dave, when I was really getting into writing and researching the Royal Arch of Enoch full swing, and this would have been in the late 90s, early 2000s. This is when I really started noticing this stuff much more and more. And 1999, it seemed, the late 90s, it seemed where, there was a couple seminal pictures released that just were overloaded with esoteric imagery, and even into the early 2000s. The ones that come to mind was the first National Treasure movie. That is literally a retelling. That's a reenactment of a Masonic ritual. The Royal Arch of Enoch ritual, which was the thesis of my first book, is a Masonic ritual ceremonial which takes place in the higher degrees. It's the 13th degree in the Scottish Rite. It's the 7th degree in the York Rite. The ritual documents the recovery, restoration of this Masonic treasure in this subterranean treasure vault beneath the Holy Ground in Jerusalem. So you watch National Treasure. Well, what's that? Same thing. It's the restoration or recovery of this Masonic Knights Templar treasure in a subterranean treasure vault beneath the Holy Ground. They said it in New York City, which is a reference to a very famous Freemason who was the mayor of New York City and governor of New York State named DeWitt Clinton, who was a very famous Royal Arch Freemason. So that when I remember seeing that, thinking, my God, I mean, here's a Masonic ritual on screen, for the whole world to see, and no one seemed to notice it. That was one of the movies. Then you had certainly in the late 90s, you had this influx of Gnostic movies, really with the first Matrix movie, which is really the Gnostic theology on film. I mean, you have the whole idea of the false reality, the sacred feminine with the Christ figure of Neo, meaning new, the sacred feminine Sophia figure being Trinity, the whole idea of the false reality, the material world being controlled by, the demiurge, the architect who shows up in the second movie. And of course, he's assisted by his group of archons to keep mankind suppressed, who are the agents, Agent Smith in the movie. So we had that, really, really a deep Gnostic movie, even on its surface to a certain extent. And then carrying on this Gnostic thread, we had The Truman Show with Jim Carrey, which again was the same thing. You had the false reality. You had the demiurge creator of the false reality, which was Christoph, played by Ed Harris. And then you had the whole idea of Truman going on this quest of enlightenment to find himself, to have this Gnostic reawakening, to know. I mean, look at his name, Truman, the true man, to find out who he is in this world. And then you also had the movie in 1999, which was Fight Club. Again, a great movie. A lot of esoteric imagery in that. You have, you have a whole thing going on in that with Gnosticism, with, the rejection of materialism, the rejection of consumerism. You have, Tyler Durden being sort of this spiritual figure who is engaging in these exercises, the deconstruction of the self physically, the deconstruction of the material world to obtain spiritual enlightenment. This is very Gnostic, going on inside that movie. You also have in that one, you talked about Freemasonry. One of your callers or commentators were asking. Fight Club also has the Masonic, a Masonic overtone to it, where you have the secret society. The Fight Club, which is an all-male, just like Freemasonry, secret society, right? You don't talk about Fight Club. In order to gain initiation into the mysteries of Fight Club, you have to stand outside the sacred temple, the sacred dojo, for 3 days. That's a clear reference to Masonry's 3 degrees, of entered apprentice, fellow craft, master mason. And then you go in and you go through, initiation process, shave your head, and then you can be initiated into the mysteries of Fight Club, which is deconstruction of the self, deconstruction of the material world to receive spiritual gnosis. I loved in Fight Club, it's shown only briefly, the sacred dojo, the Masonic temple, the mystery temple is located at 537 Paper Street. That is a reference to 357. That is in Freemasonry, a reference to the the 3 pillars of Freemasonry, the 5 orders of architecture, and the 7 liberal arts and sciences. That's taught in Freemasonry, so they put it at 537. Little twist on numbers there, but still well placed. So yeah, I mean, when I started seeing this going on in films, I thought, okay, this is beyond coincidence. And this is when, I started re-watching the Star Wars movies. At this point in time, you had the prequels coming out, which also had esoteric imagery in it. So that's when I was still writing Royal Arch of Enoch, but that's when I really started sitting up in my chair and started, paying much more attention to this and coming around to the idea of, well, this isn't a coincidence. These guys really are, playing with your subconscious mind with a lot of this archetypal imagery, with a lot of this, esoteric imagery. And it really was, for me, watching it was really, seeing the movie then as not only just a movie, but really as a piece of artwork and a piece of mythology. That's when, I was writing Royal Arch, but that's when I really started paying attention to these movies. And then just to wrap up, Dave, when Royal Arch came out in 2012 originally, I started in on cinema symbolism too immediately, and just continued on with that. And again, those 2 books are out, and I'm actually outlining Cinema Symbolism 3 right now.
Question coming from Kevin in our Spreaker chat room. He's like, Robert, I'd like to ask you about the symbolism and any Mason connection at NASA. And if you want to keep it with the Hollywood theme, there is Apollo 13 and The Right Stuff.
Well, right. This was something I delved into more in the Royal Arch of Enoch book, was because a lot of the founders of NASA were Freemasons, and you'll find Masonic overtones, all over the place with NASA emblems, and things like that. In the one you mentioned, they made a movie out of it. I mean, the Apollo 13 logo, this is actually talked about in the book, the Royal Arch of Enoch book. I mean, that has symbolic meaning. It's the, if you look at the Apollo 13, it's the sun in the Merkaba solar chariot of Ezekiel being carted across the sky. And this ties into the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial with Merkaba symbolism and the sun. And of course, the Royal Arch ceremonial is the 13th in the Scottish Rite. So, of course, it's the 13th symbol of the Apollo mission. That is no coincidence. That's completely intentionally done. You have the second man on the moon was Buzz Aldrin. He was a Scottish Rite Mason. The symbol for the Scottish Rite is the double-headed eagle, right? So, when they land on the moon, the eagle has landed, right? You have the moon, which is Luna, Diana, Hecate, which is the sacred feminine. In mythology, this is Diana, the lunar goddess, the moon goddess, the sacred feminine. So when you send men to the moon, the masculine, it's the opposite. It's the sun god, Apollo. This is why the moon rockets are the masculine, the Apollo rockets. It's the invocation of the sun. It's the unification of the sun and moon with the the Rosicrucian alchemical wedding, the Harogamos, the sacred wedding, the union of opposites. That's Freemasonic. So yeah, with NASA and a lot of the symbolism going on with that, you will definitely find this symbolism going on. You have a lot of the founders of NASA were Freemasons. A lot of the astronauts were Freemasons. So yeah, this is no surprise. If you're interested in that, and you're interested in more Masonic symbolism in material culture, in popular culture, the streetscapes, the architecture, the Masonic symbolism, the use of it, whether it be, a cityscape, the architecture, state seals and logos, even college symbols and architectural designs. Take a look at my first book, The Royal Arch of Enoch. That delves into that much more than the cinema books do. Obviously, the Royal Arch of Enoch is really the Masonic book that gets into a lot of the Masonic symbolism in culture and society. And I know, Dave, you're in Canada. I'll just add real quick that all my books are available also on Amazon Canada, the Kindle, the print editions. You can get them on Amazon Canada as well as anywhere else in the world. They're in Amazon Australia. So if you're in Canada and you're listening to this, all my books, not only the Royal Arch, are available on the Amazon Canada website as well.
Question coming in from Shar in the chat room. She is asking, what about films with subliminal messages? Is that still going on?
Well, yeah, that is to an extent. They did it. You can't do it in advertising because it was hawking a product. And movies, when you hawk a product, that's what's called product placement in a film. That I don't really delve into. That doesn't really interest me as much. This is where, you'll see it. This is where, like, for example, you watch a movie and a character picks up a Diet Coke or something and drinks it on camera. This is where Diet Coke is paying the movie makers to put their product on screen as an advertisement. This is well known. This is well documented. I don't really get involved with that. Subliminal in movies, can be esoteric imagery because it does flash before your subconscious mind, especially when you're dealing with things like the archetypes, things related to the collective unconscious, the theory of forms. This comes out of the world of Carl Jung and Plato, and you'll find this with character archetypes in films. And there can be numbers. We talked about The Exorcist earlier and Back to the Future. Numbers can be used as a great subliminal, and numbers are great to look at in films because they don't lie. A number has a meaning behind it, and it's amazing. When you begin to study the lengths that these guys go to incorporate this stuff into film. You can be looking at symbols in the background. That's part of it. An actor or an actress can be cast to bring, what I call their cultural valence to a movie, to invest it with an esoteric overtone to draw from another movie or to draw from something else. A costume design can have esoteric imagery. If you pay attention to the movie Fatal Attraction by Adrian Lyne, he's another movie maker who's very adroit with this imagery. If you pay attention to the movie Fatal Attraction, watch the Glenn Close character. She's helter-skelter, right? She's good girl, bad girl. She's evil and good. She's good one minute and evil the next minute. If you pay attention to her costuming, it's nothing but black and white, to symbolize this. It's either all white, all black, or black and white, to symbolize her endless conflict, her psychological schism with good and evil. She's good one minute and then she's evil the next minute. So costuming can be used. Music is another one that can be used. You'll find music being used in a movie to convey something or that something's happening, and then you'll find this song years later being used to convey the exact same thing. I was on another radio show talking about this. If you watch the movie, we'll go back to Mulholland Drive, David Lynch. The scene there in the middle of the movie where Betty and Rita are sitting in the theater, Club Silencio, and the singer, I believe it's Lana Del Rey, is singing Roy Orbison's "Crying" in Spanish, and that is when Betty is coming out of the fantasy land and into the real world, when she's waking up as Diane Selwyn, and the song is representing the breakdown of fantasy and into reality. It's Roy Orbison's "Crying." Well, years later, they just did this again in this television show that was on here on A&E called Bates Motel, and it was in season 5 when Norman Bates is actually breaking down from fantasy into reality, when he's coming around to the fact that he and his mother are one and the same person, and that he's the one doing the killing. And when he discovers this, they're actually playing Roy Orbison's "Crying" in the background again. And that is a clear reference to Lynch's Mulholland Drive, and it's conjuring this whole notion of the breakdown of reality, the breakdown of the fantasy reality, and the coming around, the consciousness of the reality that you are the killer, or for Betty and Rita, that Betty Elms is a fantasy figure and that Diane Swellen is the real figure. So when you're studying this and you're looking at this in films, there's a whole palette of esoteric, themes and devices that can be used to convey this imagery to your subconscious mind. And what the purpose of the books is to make it conscious, to make you aware of this, because it is just incredible to the lengths that these guys will go to place this symbolism into films, and to really transform it into artwork and mythology. That's really the end game with this.
Let's get to another question from Shar, a follow-up. Do you believe then, Robert, that all of this is a brainwashing attempt on the public who views these movies?
No, I've never believed in any way, shape, or form that I was being brainwashed when I was watching this, or anything like that. When I notice in Black Swan, when you're watching that, and Natalie Portman's character is going into the building at the beginning of it, and she sees a poster of Winona Ryder, character Beth McIntyre in it. And if you watch the film, Beth McIntyre's character is self-destructive. She tries to kill herself. She spends the rest of the movie in the bed. She's being forced into an early retirement. If you pay attention to the poster, it has Beth McIntyre on it, who of course is Winona Ryder. And it says something to the effect of new classics reinvented February 12th, coming February 12th. That date is intentionally picked. That is the birth date of a ballerina named Anna Pavlova, who in the early 19th century, late 19th century, early 20th century, crafted a ballet called The Dying Swan off of Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake. And Pavlova was born on February 12th. And of course, this is investing these attributes upon the Winona Ryder, Beth McIntyre character, who is just that, the dying swan. She's forced into retirement. The new swan queen is, of course, Nina Sayers, Natalie Portman. And, Beth McIntyre is, of course, literally the dying swan. She tries to kill herself and then spends the rest of the movie in a hospital bed, hating life. If you think I'm stretching this, someone asked earlier, is this a coincidence? Well, when you watch Black Swan, pay attention to the end credits. The end credits of the movie actually bill credit Winona Ryder as Beth McIntyre, the dying swan. So that is no coincidence there. When I discovered this, at no time did I think this was evil or that this was brainwashing or anything like that. I thought it was sublime. I thought it was real craftsmanship, going into the film, that they thought enough of this to put that in the film. And no time when I was doing this did I ever believe, that I was being brainwashed or that there was, anything like that going on. I just think it's really just expert craftsmanship, and it's just masterful how the lengths these guys will go to and to incorporate this occult imagery into film. And like I said earlier in the first hour, to me, it's really akin to, a Freemason incorporating sacred geometry, divinity, the golden ratio, the Vesica Pisces, and the architecture into a cityscape. And no time is it intended to be evil or manipulative. It's supposed to be breathtaking and inspiring. And I think that's what these movie makers are shooting for.
Let's get to Elizabeth's question here, and she is asking, Robert, is this a problem, or is it just an attempt to appeal to the Jungian subconsciousness?
Oh, I don't think it's a problem. I think some of it does appeal to the Jungian subconsciousness, and I think some of it is, some of these guys, these filmmakers, may be afflicted, maybe incorporating some of this imagery, unbeknownst to even them, that they we're all part of the collective unconscious. We all, as Plato said, the theory of forms, it's all there. There's only so many ways to tell a story. There's only, a chair is a chair. The color orange is the color orange. We just know that it is. I mean, why is the color blue blue? Just because it is. And you look at a movie such as, this is another one I talk about, is Ed Wood's the B movie director, Glenn or Glenda. Ed Wood had no knowledge of Gnosticism whatsoever. This ancient theology coming out of the 2nd, 3rd century. Wood had no knowledge of this. There's no evidence that he did. You watch this little 60-minute hokey, transvestite apologia for 60 minutes. And in this, you'll find one of the greatest examples of a Gnostic demiurge ever created. This is the Bela Lugosi sub-god puppet master figure, who controls the material world, pulls the strings of people, and manipulates society and Earth to satisfy his narrow ego. It's a great example. It's one of the best you can think of watching a Gnostic demiurgical film. Wood had no idea about this. So how is it that he's doing this? And again, it's probably Jung's theory of the collective unconscious. It's this ancient mythology, ancient theology coming out of coming out of the ancient world, and it's affecting Wood. It's affecting his subconscious mind. Wood had no idea what he was even making. I guarantee you, Dave, if you went into a time machine, went back to 1953 when Wood was making Glenn or Glenda, and you walked up to him and said, "Hey, why did you cast Lugosi as a Gnostic demiurge?" He wouldn't have known what the hell you were talking about. But there it is. So yeah, there is times that these filmmakers may be afflicted or place this stuff in their films subconsciously. Also, I believe that a lot of it is completely conscious. I believe they know what they're doing. Archetypal imagery can definitely draw. Mythology can definitely draw upon the subconscious mind, and can hook a moviegoer. Look at the movies like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or Harry Potter. I mean, by and large, they're the same thing, right? I mean, it's a character, a hero, a nobody. It's the monomyth. It's this ancient comparative religion that is part of our subconscious mind. It's Carl Jung talked about this. So did Joseph Campbell. He talks about it in his book, A Hero of a Thousand Faces. It's the same hero. Frodo Baggins, Luke Skywalker, Harry Potter. It's the unknown, common person plucked from the doldrums of society to go on some grandiose adventure, where, they ultimately confront and defeat a dark, evil lord of some kind. Call it Darth Vader, the Emperor, Sheev Palpatine, Sauron, Tom Riddle. They're assisted along the way by the Hermes Trismegistus wizard figure, Albus Dumbledore, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Gandalf the Grey. It's the Greybeard. I mean, those characters, they all look alike. I mean, it's the same character. It's the wizard. It's the white wizard who knows everything and only doles it out piecemeal. This is, all coming out of mythology. It's all part of the collective unconscious, and it's all part of ancient mythology, ancient religion, being repackaged and rebranded for a modern audience. And it really is a classic example of modern day mythology making. It's really the only way it's the only words I can think of that best describes it.
Eric is asking, because he's a huge Stanley Kubrick fan, he says, was it not a sign of Kubrick's genius that he could put so much imagery into a story that had already been written by someone else?
Yeah, well, that's right. The commenter there is on the right track there. Stephen King hated Stanley Kubrick's take on The Shining. Kubrick essentially excised out the ghost story, except for putting some skeletons and some cobwebbing in at the end to look like it's something out of a haunted house at Halloween. Then it did look like a ghost story. Instead, what Kubrick did with that movie, and he became obsessed with it. I mean, it's all over the place. We'll get into this a little bit because this is a great example to go into some of the lengths that Kubrick went into in The Shining is repetition. The Shining is an endless array of repetition and doubles. And one of the reasons he did this is to convey that the Overlook Hotel is an endless reincarnation cycle. Everything that happened in the past is happening again and will happen in the future. The Grady story is the Torrance story. The Axe murders happened once before. It's going to happen again. It's an endless Ouroboros. It's a snake biting its tail. It's endless repetition. Everything that happened before is going to repeat. So how does he convey this to you? Well, he repeats numbers. And he does it all over the place. And it's everything. it's a series of doubles. When you watch the movie, when Jack Torrance is driving to the Overlook Hotel, he's driving along. He passes two cars that are stationary and two cars that are moving. The road that he is driving on is called the Going to the Sun Road, that was made in 1921. The end of the movie, the photograph was taken in 1921. So the movie is a snake biting its tail. It ends where it begins in the year 1921. The number 12 repeats. He repeats the number 12 all over the place. In the storage facility, there are 12 turkeys, 24 pork roasts, 12 times 2. There are 12-pound bags of sugar. The hotel is KDK 12. When Wendy and Danny are in the hedge maze, they take 12 turns. Jack Torrance throws the ball against the wall 12 times. He hits the door with the axe 12 times. 2 times are shown on the screen, 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. Add 8 plus 4 to get the number 12. The room, 237, add it to get the number 12. This is some of the, repetition that he does. The number 42 repeats. What is it? Danny at the beginning has the number 42 on his sweater there, on his little sweatshirt. And then what's his name? Scatman Crothers. What's his name in the movie? It's escaping me. Has the number 42 on his license plate when he's driving back to the Overlook. When Danny and Wendy are watching the movie in the Overlook Hotel, it's the summer of 42. This seems, why did he pick the number 42? And when the room number again, 237, multiply it to get the number 32, or get the number 42, excuse me. 42, why use that number? It seems to have to do with evil. And the Antichrist in the Bible, we're told in the Bible that the Antichrist will rule for 42 years. It could be a reference to Jack Torrance turning evil, making him this demonic figure. So we have that going on. But it's just this endless doubles go on. There are 2 boilers that are in the hotel. There are 2 mazes, the outdoor hedge maze and the hotel. The dark corridors are a maze. There's the 2 little girls. Then there's another set of older twins. When Danny sees the little girls in the playroom, in the games room, in the Overlook, and the little twin girls are just standing there. Then the next scene is Jack and Wendy being led by Ullman to their suite. And you pass another set of twins, and Ullman says, "Have a great, winter, girls. See you next summer." Another set of twins is repeated. So the whole thing is just an endless array of repetition, doubles. That Kubrick bombards your subconscious mind with to convey. His motivation for this is to convey this endless Ouroboros, this snake biting its tail, this endless repetition cycle going on inside the Overlook. Kubrick is a real master at it. And what's really great with Kubrick is he understands symbolism. You go to a movie that he made, his last movie actually, Eyes Wide Shut, what I call is a luministic impulse. He uses an array of symbolism and symbology in that movie as well, but it's different from The Shining. In The Shining, he uses repetition to convey this endless array of, this repetition cycle going on inside the Overlook. But he uses symbolism in Eyes Wide Shut, but it's different because he knows there's no repetition in Eyes Wide Shut. So he uses a different set of symbols and esoteric themes and imagery to convey occult meanings in Eyes Wide Shut. That's the real symbol. That's the real hallmarks of a master. And Kubrick was one of them, no question about it.
One of the movies, or the type of movies I like, are wartime movies. I'm a big fan of Platoon, Full Metal Jacket, all those types of movies. Do we see a lot? Do we see a lot of symbolism in war movies as well? Even though the meaning is supposed to be about respecting the stories that the war heroes had to go through.
It's been a while since I've watched war movies. It's been a while since I've seen Full Metal Jacket and things like Apocalypse Now. I have to go back and take a look at them, Dave. If there was esoteric imagery in there, it wouldn't surprise me. But right now, speaking to you tonight, it's been so long since I've really seen those movies and things like Platoon that I'm going to just have to pass. I'm not saying it's there. I'm not saying it's not, but I get asked all the time when I come on shows, hey, did you tell me about the esoteric movie, imagery going on inside this movie, but it's a movie I haven't seen, or it's a movie I haven't seen in quite some time. So, again, those movies, it's been so long since I've seen them. So, I'd have to go back and take another look. I'm not saying there isn't any there. It's just, I couldn't tell you right now because it's been so long since I've seen them.
Well, I found with war movies, though, it usually builds, even though you have the fighting scenes going on, it's usually based around, at least my perception of it, is the music. How important is music when it comes to setting some sort of esoteric image to any sort of film?
Oh, it can be, sure. Absolutely. Music can be employed, to convey esoteric, to have an esoteric meaning. If it's used in one movie to convey something, it can be used in another movie to convey that exact same thing. We saw the example with Roy Orbison's Crying. Again, it's another David Lynch movie. I forget the name of the performer of it. And it's used for the same reason. In David Lynch's Lost Highway, when the reality breakdown is occurring, and it's a breakdown of the fantasy world back to reality. In that movie, he uses another song, and it's called "Song to the Siren." I forget who performs it. And this movie is used. The song is used years later in 2009 by Peter Jackson for the same contextual purpose in a movie he made called The Lovely Bones, where the little girl dies and it's the end of her material reality, and she's entering this purgatory-like afterlife, and the same music is playing, and it's used to convey the same sort of thing. Peter Jackson is drawing upon Lynch again, the breakdown of reality, the transmutation of reality and fantasy, the overlap of the two, and it's being used by Jackson in The Lovely Bones to convey the same thing. So it's a filmmaker years later using the song that was used earlier by a filmmaker to convey the exact same meaning that the earlier filmmaker used. So yes, music can play a critical role in that. It definitely tweaks your subconscious mind. The Roy Orbison one with Bates Motel and from Lynch's Mulholland Drive was fantastic. I recognized that one immediately. I was like, oh, my hat's off to you. That's really clever there. So yeah, music, is very important. I mean, it's just, not even something like that. I mean, you look at, you listen to, what's his name? The guy who conducted the Star Wars soundtrack, Williams. I forget his first name. It's escaping me. I mean, he even said, the Star Wars opening music is based on the music of Richard Wagner, the German composer, the great, the great mythological works of Richard Wagner, which was conveying this, Germanic, mythology of the One Ring and power and good versus evil. And of course, you had this going on in Star Wars, the Empire, the Rebellion, this, great, grand, space opera. And, Williams was using Wagner as his template in composing the Star Wars music. So yeah, music is very important and can also play a role in this. A lot of things can. It's a deep study, Dave, and like I said, these filmmakers really draw from a wide range of things when using esoteric imagery in film. It's not just one thing. So it's a wide variety of imagery that can be used.
Well, I'm thinking when I think music, Quentin Tarantino, he builds his movies around certain songs. He has said that on interviews before, that the song that is chosen for certain scenes can make or break the scene. So do you think that he goes to the extreme in using music as symbology for what is happening during a film?
Well, sure. I mean, Tarantino is using a music, certainly in those type of movies, to set a mood. No question about it. And music can be done for that as well. I like it when it's more esoteric, like with the Bates Motel example and with the Lovely Bones. That's what, draws me in more than just setting the mood. But yeah, I mean, like you're absolutely right. Quentin Tarantino does it. You think of something like Pulp Fiction or something. I mean, some of the songs in that just you say Pulp Fiction. I mean, you think of some, music almost comes to mind when you think of that movie. So yeah, I mean, that's music is very critical in this. I like it when the filmmakers use it when it was used earlier, like 20 years earlier, and in a specific scene to convey something, or was being used in a scene to convey something, and then they use it, to draw on it years later to convey the exact same thing. That's sort of what more I'm into. But no, with Star Wars, the opera music to convey, the space opera, Tarantino to set a scene. Yeah, absolutely, very important.
See, the other director that really captivates me is M. Night Shyamalan, who I find his movies that, they're almost like a trick question, that you have to figure out the riddle to at the end. When directors like M. Night Shyamalan or Quentin Tarantino put such a real different spin on their type of movie, how do they bring in these Easter eggs or these symbolisms when their movies are so off base from what they want the public to actually see until the end?
Right. Well, like Tarantino's movies, you bring him up, I would say he's one of the directors whose movies are completely devoid of esoteric imagery. I like his movies, but I've watched all of them, and I've never seen anything in them worth analyzing. I like them. But I've never found any esoteric imagery in any of his films. I mean, I love Reservoir Dogs, and I love Pulp Fiction. I'm not a fan of I haven't seen. I didn't like the Kill Bill movies at all. I thought those were terrible. Those were total Shaw Brother ripoff movies, and I just hated them. I did not like the Nazi movie either. I can't remember the name of that either. I thought that was terrible. I haven't seen the Django Unchained, and I haven't seen The Hateful Eight yet. But I loved his two favorite movies of me for Tarantino are Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs. But I saw some archetypal imagery, but I never really saw anything hidden beneath the celluloid with any of those. Shyamalan, I like The Sixth Sense. I'm not a big fan of his movies after that. The Sixth Sense, though, he screws up. He uses it's a movie largely based on a movie that came out years earlier called Jacob's Ladder, which was another Adrian Lyne film. Now, he's an expert on this stuff. And if you ever watch Jacob's Ladder, that's the template for The Sixth Sense. I wasn't really a big fan of The Village. I haven't seen some of his later ones. I wasn't a fan of the comic book one, Unbreakable. I didn't really care for that.
Signs.
Which one?
Signs.
I didn't like that either. No, not for me. But I did see it. I didn't see anything really going on beneath the surface of that. But The Sixth Sense, and he said this in an interview. I actually heard him say this. He said that when he put the color red on the screen, and he did this whenever something bad was about to happen. And it was if you know esoteric imagery in film, it's a deep study. The color red, if it's presented in the right context, has to do with alchemy. It's a symbol. It's a color related to medieval alchemy, and Shyamalan uses it in The Sixth Sense. He says, "I used red to convey that something bad was about to happen," and he's getting that from another movie. He's getting that from a movie that came out in the early 70s with Donald Sutherland called "Don't Look Now." This is a movie, people love this movie or hate it. There's no gray area on this thing. You got to see it. I don't want to give it away. It has a surprise ending as well. But it has to do with this little girl at the beginning of it, this daughter of Donald Sutherland and his wife, who's running around in a red rain slicker, a red raincoat, and she drowns. And it devastates Donald Sutherland and his wife. And they actually have to leave the United States to get away, and they move to Italy, Venice. And I don't want to give the movie away, but what happens is the wife, Donald Sutherland's wife, falls in with this kind of pseudo witches coven, weird psychic group who tells her that her dead daughter is trying to communicate with her from the afterlife. As this is happening, Donald Sutherland is seeing this little person running around in this red rain slicker in the background of Venice, Italy, while this is going on. And as this is unfolding in Venice, we're told that there's this series of horrific murders going on inside Venice, Italy. To make a long story short, I don't want to give it away. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. It's a good movie. I like it. Some people hate it. there is this buildup that you're led to believe that this person running around Venice, Italy in the red rain slicker is the ghost of the dead daughter trying to reach out to them. I will say no further more on that. But this is where Sullivan is getting this whole idea of the use of the color red to convey something bad is about to happen. If you've seen Don't Look Now, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. I won't spoil the movie. So Sullivan is drawing upon that for the color red. I like that. And he also, I mean, if you ever see The Sixth Sense, the trick ending there, of course, watch the movie, the one I just said, the Adrian Lyne one, Jacob's Ladder, your MK Ultra movie about government experimentation there. That is a movie that I analyzed in Cinema Symbolism 2. That is a very alchemical movie. It has some Gnostic themes in it. It's quasi-Gnostic. And it has some great esoteric imagery in it, but it has the trick ending as well. And this, and it is. It's if you watch Jacob's Ladder, you'll see where Sullivan got the idea for The Sixth Sense from.
Let's move back a couple of steps here, as Guy has a question. In Canada we use Guy instead of Guy. So Guy is asking, you say it's being slipped into our subconscious. This is when we were talking about, the symbolism and everything like that. He goes, yet you disagree that it's brainwashing. Could you please explain the difference?
Right. Well, I mean, it's not that they're not the brainwashing is something like the Manchurian Candidate. I mean, these films aren't designed to make you go out and do anything specific. The brainwashing you to do what? I mean, there's no. I use this esoteric imagery in my books. For example, the first movie book I wrote, the intro from the preface to the chapter 1 is 47 pages. That I did on purpose. That's a reference to the 47th proposition of Euclid. That was to denote that I, Robert W. Sullivan IV, am a Freemason, and the book is of Masonic authorship. I don't think I was brainwashing anybody by doing that. And I don't think these filmmakers, you hear this brainwashing you to do what? Am I supposed to go out and buy merchandise? Well, they tell you that anyway by advertising. What Star Wars movie doesn't have a toy line with it or something? So no, I mean, I never saw the use of numbers in The Shining, or the Manichaean symbolism in The Exorcist, or the Gnostic overtones in the Matrix movie as any form of brainwashing. It does, just because something is secret doesn't necessarily make it brainwashing. It's conscious, it's subconscious, but it can become conscious. You become aware of it. You know what you're looking at. You become aware of Gnostic doctrines. It's no longer subconscious. Then it's right there in the world for you to see. You watch a movie like The Truman Show, for example. If you become familiar with Gnostic theology, it's no longer subconscious. It's completely conscious. You'll recognize Ed Harris is the demiurge. You'll understand that Sea Haven is the false reality. You'll understand that Truman is a man trapped in a false world who is trying to escape it. This is, of course, the Gnostic theology. So what is subconscious can become conscious. And again, this was part of my motivation for writing the books. But no, I've never viewed any of this as brainwashing. To me, that's completely ridiculous. But, that's my take on it.
We only have about 4 minutes here, 3.5 minutes before we got to go to our next break. I'm going to get a quick question in here from Tripp. He is asking, Robert, do you just watch the movies to find your information, or do you also go over scripts as well?
No, that's a good question. I do watch the movies, but the dialogue is important. And I do watch movies, sometimes paying very close attention to the dialogue. Very, very subtle things can, be mentioned or said that can have tremendous meaning in films. And sometimes it's, there's many a time where I have to watch a scene to pay attention to the dialogue, to make sure I heard it correctly, to make sure, make sure that my understanding of what's being conveyed is, what's being said. So, no, I do look at scripts from time to time, not all the time. But there's many a time when I watch a movie, if I have trouble hearing something it's mumbled. If I have the Blu-ray, I'll put on the caption so I can hear and see what they're saying to make sure I'm correct. I don't want to misquote or something like that. So no, I do that from time to time to make sure that, it's all fitting in the context and that, that I'm hearing what I think I'm hearing, I am actually hearing. And the a lot of times you'll read the script and it'll have a line, but then when you watch the movie, the actor will have slightly changed it. It'll just come out a little bit differently. So you can't quote the script directly. You could say, this is what it was in the script, but this is what it was in the movie. That I've encountered numerous times, where it'll be something in the script, but then when the actor actually said it, it comes out a little differently. So yeah, I do look at it. It is important to the context and to make sure I'm hearing it right. And what I usually do a lot of the times is if I can't hear something, this was the case in the movie Mother that I just watched. There was some dialogue at the beginning of it that I had trouble hearing. I just couldn't quite hear what they were saying. It was a little mumbling. The characters were talking in another room. And the character was listening in, and you kind of had trouble hearing. So I remember putting it on, where the English dialogue, the screen cap, or the dialogue came up at the bottom of the screen. That helped me. So yeah, I do that from time to time.
Do you find that usually the script may be a little bit off of what you're actually seeing on film?
No, it's pretty accurate. It pretty much stays the course. You get deleted scenes, of course, that don't make it in. Depending if you get the Blu-ray, some have them on there, some don't. A lot of times you watch the deleted scene, you'll understand why it was deleted. But no, I by and large, the scripts are pretty accurate. Again, if it's changed, it's usually just a slight variance. I usually do it just for accuracy purposes. Just to be accurate about it. But in some instances, obviously, the dialogue can be very important. You want to hear what the characters are saying. That can be critical. And if you misunderstand it, or you don't pick up on it, you may miss the context or something. So no, I do from time to time look at the scripts if I feel it's necessary, and certainly if I feel there's dialogue in a movie that I think is important, I'm having trouble picking it up because maybe the guy's speaking with a heavy overseas accent or something. I will put the English subtitles on. I do that from time to time.
All right, I'm going to get you to hold on right there. Robert W. Sullivan IV is our guest tonight. He is a studious researcher and author in regards to esoteric symbolism, occult, movie Easter eggs, masonry, and so much more. We're glad to have him here. He's going to stick with us one more hour on Spaced Out Radio. We'll be right back after the final break of the night.
Hello, SOR listeners. Lorian Fenton here. Let me ask you, now that disclosure's happened, what does it mean for ufology? For answers, join us at UFOCon 2018 in South San Francisco, California, March 23rd through 25th. Keynote speakers Stephen Bassett, Grant Cameron, and Melinda Leslie address the current disclosure agenda. Dave Scott, yes, you're Dave Scott, and Lynn Buchanan tell of amazing alien encounters. Get your tickets at caufocon.com. That's caufocon.com.
Are you tired of being blocked, shadow banned, or placed in jail for simply posting your thoughts on social media? Social Media Freedom can take care of that for you. Social Media Freedom is the newest and one of the best free new apps that allows you the freedom to post what you want, when you want. It takes seconds to download from your app store. Come join the tribe at Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free.
The first annual Caribou Paracon is happening September 28th to 30th in the 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Brought to you by the Canadian Society of Questers and Spaced Out Radio. Come listen to our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Elizabeth Anglin, Paisley Town, Mike Moran, Eric Cooper, and more. It's a 3-day supernatural adventure at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Tickets for the weekend are $150 Canadian. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
A timepiece is a reflection of who you are, and what better way to show off the real you than with an Escape watch? Escape is a lifestyle brand accessorizing your days and nights. Choose to escape and create the life of discovery that you deserve. Dream, play, unite with your own personalized Escape watch. Head to escapewatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
We are lighting the void on Saturday nights on Spaced Out Radio. Hey, this is Joe Roop, and I'm hanging out in SOR headquarters every Saturday night, bringing you the latest news when it comes to the weird and strange. Bigfoot, occult, UFOs, ghosts, and everything in between, I got you covered. You can tune in to SpacedOutRadio.com starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. Come travel into the void with us on Spaced Out Saturdays.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on SpacedOutRadio.com.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4 Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories, from alien encounters to the latest conspiracies. You won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories.
It's Cosmic Sundays with me, Elizabeth Anglin, in Cosmic Passport. Let me take you down a 3-hour spiritual journey where we will get into everything from ET contact to Psychic Sundays. It's a journey of listening and learning together with some of the best professionals in their fields. You can tune in to Cosmic Passport at spacedoutradio.com every Sunday starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, Sheila Renee Parker is going to join us. We are going to talk about witchcraft. We are going to talk about spells. Do they work? We're going to find out tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live on The Fringe FM, and if you listen in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to revolution.radio and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. I have no idea what the hell this is, to be absolutely honest. Nemi Docoptiasis? Nemi Docoptiasis? Whatever. Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the Mighty SOR. I shake my fist at you tonight, Bill, because you got me. Oh, I hate that password sometimes. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can follow us live on periscope.tv. You can also follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect live with me during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio for our archives. We are on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn, download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. Rock out to some Bumblefoot, shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, read up on the encounter online, or watch great videos from UFO Seekers, Contact TV, and so much more. Now, for the final time tonight, we introduce author Robert W. Sullivan IV. He is a professional researcher and author when it comes to all things occult, masonry, movies. And tonight we are talking about Hollywood. We're talking about Easter eggs, the symbolism in behind movies. Robert, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me on Spaced Out Radio tonight. The show's been tremendous. First 2 hours were great.
Flew by.
Flew by. And look forward to wrapping up hour 3. And it's great being on. Thank you for having me on. My pleasure to be here. And let's do this.
All right. Well, we always like to keep our audience involved with this show. So they got a few questions they want to ask. So I'm going to fire them away at you here and see what you do. Trip is asking on Periscope, he's saying, what got you started into picking apart movies the way you do?
Right. It started, it's a good question. It started when I was writing The Royal Arch of Enoch, my first book. I was applying all this symbolism, with this Masonic and occult, an esoteric symbolism to what we've talked about, the cityscapes, the architecture, the logos of the schools, NASA, the symbolism and the philosophies coming out of these Masonic rituals. If you're interested in that, check out my first book. You're going to love it. When I was writing Royal Arch and I was finishing it, this was a big book. This was nearly 700 pages. I was talking about all this, arcane symbolism and the Masonic history and, the United States and the founding of it. And I really wanted to bring the book up to the 21st century. And it was at this time, and I mentioned this, last hour, that this movie National Treasure was coming out. And I remember watching it thinking, well, my God, holy crap. I mean, there's the Masonic ritual. This ritual I just wrote about. I mean, here it is on the big screen. I mean, here it is literally being dramatized on the big screen for everyone to watch. I mean, here's the Royal Arch of Enoch ritual. That fascinated me. And I had seen some other movies that also had this sort of Masonic solar overtones in it. And I thought, well, this will be a really great way to end the Royal Arch of Enoch book. Let me bring it up. I start by ending the book by talking about Masonic, Enochian solar symbolism in film. So some of the movies that I broke down, in the Royal Arch of Enoch, which I saw this was going on, and this was the Ninth Gate with Johnny Depp again, the late '90s. The movie Being There with Peter Sellers is a solar allegory. The King Arthur story is a solar allegory. And the best movie to see that with is the Excalibur movie, John Borman's movie. Again, that was a movie from '79, '80. That was a movie I grew up on. I love that movie. But the whole King Arthurian legend story is solar astrological. And this ties into Freemasonry. A lot of Masonic symbolism is solar and astrological in nature. So when I finished the Royal Arch of Enoch book, I wanted to, I thought this was a great way to end the book, was to end it with talking about these Masonic themes going on in film, or solar themes, at least. Let's just leave it at that. And I just liked it so much, and I thought this was just such a great subject matter. I thought, well, at this point, there were other movies that I was aware of that had this arcane imagery in it, such as, the Matrix movie or the Star Wars movies, or Lord of the Rings, which were coming out, which, involved the Joseph Campbell, hero's journey monomyth. And I thought, well, let's continue on. Let's continue on this last chapter of the Royal Arch of Enoch book, but let's just do it on movies that not necessarily may be Masonic or solar in nature, but just have arcane imagery in them. So, I did, of course, the big three, the Star Wars movies. I did all 6 of them. I did the Lord of the Rings, the monomyth, the Matrix films. I did all 3 of those. These were very Gnostic. The Exorcist movie, with the light versus dark. And, what I would call, neo-Manichaeanism, Zoroastrianism, Zoroastrian dualism, light versus dark, good versus evil. This is something that is carried forward with another string of movies that involved demonism and the Antichrist, which is the Omen films. These movies also play on this whole light versus dark, good versus evil. For example, if you watch the second Omen film, this is the one with the Antichrist. Damien Thorne is coming into his own. He's, a teenager. He's becoming a teenager. He's growing up. He's becoming more powerful. If you watch that movie, it takes place, it interlaps between autumn and winter. It's always autumn and winter. It's the death of the sun. It's the death of divine light. It's never spring or summer. If you watch the second Omen movie, that's all it is autumn and winter, autumn and winter. It just goes back and forth between autumn and winter. Interestingly, if you watch the third Omen movie, The Final Conflict, this is the one where the Antichrist, Damien Thorne, is defeated. We have, this is when the light, Jesus, divine light returns. This is celebrated in Christianity and even in Judaism with Easter Passover. This is the celebration of the end of winter, the end of the winter months, the end of the darkness, the end of the cold, the end of darkness, quote unquote, evil. The vernal equinox is here. This is when the light returns and the daylight officially overtakes the darkness and the days start becoming longer. So it's the vernal equinox is the triumph of light over dark. If you watch the final, this is very interesting, and this is very esoteric. The final Omen movie was actually released. This is the death of the Antichrist. This is the one where Damien Thorne finally gets the dagger stuck in him. This movie was released on the vernal equinox of 1981. And actually, when you watch the movie, Christ returns at the vernal equinox. So it's the whole, esoteric imagery of light versus dark, light defeating dark in the case of the Omen. So these were movies that I had seen and I wanted to talk about more, and they weren't necessarily Masonic. So that the end of the Royal Arch book is what got me started. And it was the first movie book, Cinema Symbolism, was kind of continuation on. And then Cinema Symbolism 2 was the same thing. It was a sequel. So, being a sequel, I just called it Cinema Symbolism 2. And that's what really got me started was, the Star Wars monomyth, looking at these movies on a Masonic standpoint for the Royal Arch of Enoch book. But then, Masonry aside, just going much more deeper into the esoteric imagery into these films. And it produced 2 movie books, Cinema Symbolism 2, and I'm currently writing Cinema Symbolism 3 as we speak.
Shar has a question here. She is asking, what are your thoughts on the movie 23?
Oh, is this the movie with Jim Carrey?
Yes.
It's been so long since I've seen it. I'm not going to comment on it. I'd have to take another look at it. It's been years since I've seen that movie. And, I don't like to comment on movies or offer an analysis on something that I haven't seen or something I've seen so long ago that it's not fresh in my head. So I'd have to get back on you. I'd have to take a rain check on that and take another look at it. But, when you're dealing with a number like that, I mean, I remember, the number was seen everywhere. I'd have to go back and take a look at it. But it strikes me just off the top of my head that, probably has something going on in it. But not having seen it in so long, I'm not going to comment. I just have to go back and take a look at it.
Okay, Joseph then has a follow-up here saying, have you seen the movie Room 237? If so, what do you think of that theory?
Oh, well, that's the documentary on The Shining. And that's the whole thing with, the Kubrick movie, The Shining, is all about repetition. This thing has to do with whether he faked, Kubrick is the guy who faked the NASA footage. That's what the theory is on that. I mean, I'm not sure. It's an interesting theory. It's possible. The theory is that Kubrick, because of his work on Dr. Strangelove and 2001, that he was employed by the government to film the footage of the guys jumping around in a studio on the moon. The moon landing. The theory is that they could have actually gone to the moon, but they couldn't shoot there. They couldn't film there, so they filmed in a studio. The guys hopping around on. In a studio, with the moon footage, and the guy who filmed it is supposedly Stanley Kubrick. This is actually, it's funny that you mentioned this because it's actually mentioned in one of the James Bond movies. I think it's Diamonds Are Forever, where Bond is actually in Las Vegas, and he goes into the Area 51 area, and they're faking the moon landing in the James Bond movie. But getting back to the question, Kubrick supposedly gives this away in The Shining, where the boy, Danny, is wearing the Apollo 11 sweater and stands up and, that's the rocket launch. And then he goes into room 237, which at the time was, in the late 80s, was the distance from the Earth to the moon, which is 237,000 miles. So Kubrick is supposed to be symbolically telling you that he's the guy who faked or staged the moon landing footage. It's an interesting theory. I talk about it briefly in my book. I don't know. I guess it's possible. I've not made up my mind on it one way or another. I know that The Shining is overloaded with repetition, and that conforms in the contextual basis of the film, with it being a movie about reincarnation and about things repeating itself. The whole idea with the moon landing, I'm 50-50 on. I guess it's possible. It's an interesting theory. I'm not willing to dismiss it. I'm not going to confirm it either. But it's certainly interesting, and it's always something to look at and keep in the back of your head when you're watching the movie. So that's my take on that.
Let's get to Joe's question here, and he is asking, Robert, could you please compare the subliminal Easter eggs with Hollywood's blatant political activism?
Well, I don't know if they are related. Clearly Hollywood is tilted towards one political party right now. That is irrefutable. And they're pretty outward about it. We talked about this in the first hour of the show, and probably was one of the reasons why the Oscars were so poorly rated, one would think. I don't know if I see any correlation, with a political ideology in some of these movies like The Shining or Black Swan or anything like that to this. Now, I know in Mother, which was Aronofsky, I wouldn't call it political per se, but it's obviously an environmental movie. It has to do with the destruction of the earth. Aronofsky is an atheist. He's not a fan of the Abrahamic faiths, especially Christianity. He lets that be known in the film. I don't know if that's really political or not. When you say political movies to me, the one that screams off the screen is The Wizard of Oz. That's not modern day politics, but it is 19th century, turn of the century, last century politics with President William McKinley and Theodore Roosevelt. The whole movie is a political allegory. So that when you say political allegory to me, that's the one that comes to mind. I don't disagree in any way, shape, or form that right now Hollywood, is politicized. certainly I think that's pretty irrefutable. But I don't know if I see a correlation, at least right now. Maybe something will come out in the next year or two that'll reaffirm this. But I don't see any correlation right now, at least for the movies that I analyze. And some of the movies I take on are years old. Even like movies like The Matrix now are almost 20 years old. Hard to believe. Were those movies being, politicized back then? No, I don't think so. Another movie, you do have political, now I'll say this, you do have political figures that turn up in film esoterically. That is true. That does happen. For instance, Forrest Gump is Bill Clinton. Doc Brown in Back to the Future is a Ronald Reagan analog. That does happen. There are things like that happening, but I suspect, I think that the better way to answer your question is if Hollywood persists down this political idealization, diatribe that they're outward about, will this start turning up on film? I think that may start happening in the next year or so, or maybe 2 years or so. That may be something you see down the road a little bit. So that would be my answer to that. But when you say political movies, like a hidden political movie, The Wizard of Oz, but you do have presidents that are veiled in movies as well.
Trip is asking, do you do the same type of analogies with paintings?
In the Royal Arch of Enoch, I do get into some artwork, with paintings. With artwork. Yes, I do. I can't remember in the movie books, I do a little bit where a movie, where like an image from a movie, maybe drawing from a painting, like we talked about The Exorcist with the Last Supper painting. In the Royal Arch, I do get into some more artwork with like Nicholas Poisson, people like that. I do break down some artwork from time to time if I feel it's appropriate, if I feel it's contextual. There was a painting in Cinema Symbolism 3. Alfred Hitchcock is someone I like to talk about. I'm doing the Bates Motel in Cinema Symbolism 3, and there's a painting. I forget the name of it. It escapes me right now. It's a painting. I just found this out recently. It's a painting that he based the Bates Motel house upon. The one that sits in the background. So that I'm going to talk about a little bit. So no, the answer to your question is yes, I do analyze paintings, artwork, if it's contextually basis and if it fits into my narrative. Yes, I will take it on.
This goes to Eric's question now, and he says, Robert, do you remember the films based on the Thomas Tryon books, Harvest Home and the other? If so, what do you think about those symbolically?
Boy, oh boy, you're going back. Those are like made-for-TV movies. They came out kind of like around Halloween, I think. There was like Night of the Dark Scarecrow was one of them. Harvest Home also had to do with like ritual sacrifice in like a neo-pagan cult in an East Coast town. Boy, oh boy, you're really going back on those with me. It's been years since I've watched those. My goodness gracious. That's good though. That's good you bring those up. Yeah, I'd have to go back and take a look at them. There could be something in there. Those movies definitely do with like neo-pagan themes and things like that. I'd have to honestly, it's been years. Boy, oh boy. I mean, those things came out when I was a child. I think I watched those like in VHS tapes in the 80s or so. It's been so long again since I've seen them. I wouldn't dare offer commentary on something I haven't seen that long ago. But I know what the films that the commentator, the questioner is talking about. I'd have to go back and look at them. It's been too long since I've seen them. But I would not be at all surprised if there wasn't something in there. But again, it's been too long since I've seen them. That's really a trip down memory lane for me. I mean, I remember a lot of those movies. My goodness gracious. Watching those on TV growing up as a child, my God, I think some of those I was probably like 2 or 3 years old. I think I saw most of the one I remember was Salem's Lot. That aired on television. I really like that. I didn't see anything esoteric in it. I have that on Blu-ray here. Those Harvest Home movies, and I think there was one, Night of the Scarecrow was another one that came to mind. I didn't think I saw those till the 80s, until VHS tapes came out. But trip down memory lane for me. But no, been too long since I've seen them. I'd have to go take a look at them.
Shar is asking, why do you think, Robert, that so many movies are having Masonic imagery in them?
Well, I don't know if it's that many movies. Some movies do. When you say Masonic movies to me, the ones that kind of I think of that I talk about is certainly National Treasure. I did the Arthurian Legend Excalibur and Being There. Those were more solar than Masonic, although Being There has the, quote unquote, Illuminati Masonic crypt there at the end. Yeah, there are, Masonry is a, very popular fraternal secret society organization. It has a plethora and treasure trove of symbolism. People like to use it. People like to draw from it. Certainly Masonic movies. We have The Man Who Would Be King would be a good one. That has some esoteric imagery in it. That was based on a novella. The movie was made. It came out in the mid-'70s, I want to say. Starred, who is it? Sean Connery and Michael Caine. And that was based on a novella written by Rudyard Kipling, who was a Freemason. That movie was remade. Has a very lot. That movie is paralleled very, very cleverly by a movie that came out in the late 90s, I want to say, or maybe it was early 90s. No, it was early 90s, 92, 93, called Stargate. If you ever see the movie Stargate, this is the original one with Kurt Russell. That is a all but remake of The Man Who Would Be King, which is very Masonic. And again, it's outwardly Masonic. The two characters in it are Freemasons. Masonry offers a lot of symbolism. It offers a lot of mythology. So, you do see movies coming out, with, based on Masonic symbolism. You also have characters, who occasionally wear a Masonic ring or a Masonic badge. I know in the movie Tombstone, this be the case with some of the cowboys in there who wear Masonic badges and tokens and things. So, Masonry is, esoteric and popular, and some movies, not all movies, some movies definitely draw from it.
Let's get to Joseph's question here. Robert, do you ever touch on propaganda in movies, much like U.S. military script approvals, nuclear family, materialism, propaganda, etc.?
Yes, I do to an extent. There is truth to this. What the questioner is talking about, no question about it. There are government approved scripts. The FBI reviews some of the X-Files storyline or dialogue and scripts. That is absolutely true. That absolutely happens. Yankee Doodle Dandy with Jimmy Cagney was World War II propaganda. That happens. One of the Transformer movies, I think it was the second one, I can't remember. Excuse me. Was what was it? It was the Transformer movie where they unveiled the railgun. The Navy destroyer had the railgun, and they fired it. The Transformers were fighting on top of the pyramids at Giza, and the railgun released a pulse ray and shot down one of the Transformers, and that was intentional. That was actually about a few months later, the Navy came forward and said, "Oh yeah, the railgun, we've developed one, and we used the Transformer movie to unveil it." So this does happen. I do talk about it. I don't think I spend a lot of time on it, but I do talk about, talk about this in the books that, the military, the government can walk hand in hand with Hollywood in certain instances, not all the times, of course, but it can happen. And yes, I am familiar with this. And certainly I remember with the X-Files in the 90s, the FBI was actually reviewing a lot of the scripts for accuracy purposes. So no, this does occur, and I am familiar with it.
That question, Joseph, thank you, reminded me of this as well, and I wanted to bring this up with you. In the 70s and 80s, we saw a lot of extraterrestrial-type movies with very benevolent-type creatures, and it's almost like since the movie Fire in the Sky, which I believe came out in 92 or 93, that we have seen almost a complete turn of anything extraterrestrial being of a very negative and malevolent nature. Do you think that this type of symbolism is what people or what the government is trying to impose on the people, because you think of movies, you think of video games, anything to do with extraterrestrials on screen or television is usually of a very negative nature.
I don't know today if that be the case. If that's sponsored by the government, I think it's just more of a storytelling component. I don't see anything really with that. I can tell you that, and this is something I talked about in the first movie book. When you get into the space alien invasion movie from the 1950s, this is an allegory for the Red Menace. This is an allegory of the Soviet Union intruding upon or infiltrating Eisenhower's pristine United States. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the Day the Earth Stood Still, This Island Earth. These are all allegories of the Red Menace. And then walking hand in hand with this was to fight the Red Menace, we had to have nuclear weapons. So then you have the giant bug movie. Or the giant insect movie that always was spawned because the United States had to develop weapons, and the insect or the creature, was always, got exposed to this, radiation somehow, was trying to be disposed of. So you have movies like Them or Mantis, or then of course the granddaddy of them all, Godzilla, which was an allegory for the nuclear weapon upon Japan. Godzilla always wants to take out Tokyo, basically. So these movies were all an allegory for nuclear proliferation and the Red Menace. The alien movies like E.T. and then you have Independence Day. I mean, I think these were just narratives, that were just put out by Hollywood. I don't know if I really see any sort of government hand in any of those with those movies. I just look to me more like storytelling than anything else.
Psycho is asking, what about older movies and symbolism, repetition, etc.? Is it more thought out and prevalent in the older movies, like, say, 1963's Lord of the Flies?
Well, Lord of the Flies was based on a novel, and I'd have to go back and look at that to see. That's been too long since I've seen that. But no, you will find esoteric imagery going back to the days, the inception of Hollywood. Metropolis, Fritz Lang, is very Gnostic. The vampire movie Nosferatu, Bram Stoker. The vampire movie is an allegory for Madame Blavatsky and the Golden Dawn. And Theosophy intruding upon Victorian England and Victorian Christianity. And you'll find this again with Lugosi's Dracula, Frankenstein's monster. Mary Shelley is a Kabbalistic golem. The Wizard of Oz is a political allegory and has a lot of esoteric imagery in it relating to theosophy. The guy who wrote Wizard of Oz, L. Frank Baum, was in Madame Blavatsky's Theosophy movement, Theosophy Society, and you will find those symbolisms all over, Theosophy's fingerprints all over the Wizard of Oz. In the 60s, James Bond. The 70s, The Exorcist, horror movies, Halloween, Carpenter has some very fascinating archetypal imagery in it. So, I guess the point I was trying to make, I think I made this in the first hour, was Hollywood, since its inception, has incorporated esoteric imagery in its movies, in its product. And you'll find this throughout history. Like I said, you'll find it in the works of William Shakespeare. You'll find it in the works of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. You'll find it in the works of people like Richard Wagner and his operas. You mentioned books written by they ultimately get made into movies like J.R.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis. They incorporate a lot of esoteric imagery that turns up in its cinematic counterpart. So it's been going on since Hollywood's inception, and it continues on to this day.
Eric is asking, have you ever applied the symbolism study to the layout and monuments of Washington, D.C.?
Read the Royal Arch of Enoch book. I have a whole chapter on Washington, D.C., on the monuments, on the template, on the Capitol building, the dome, the White House, the Washington Monument, its alignments, the Supreme Court building. If you're interested, I get into the architecture of Baltimore, Maryland, Washington, D.C., the Erie Canal, Union College of Schenectady, New York has architectural Masonic symbolism. a lot of the state seals and logos. If you're interested in that, read my first book, The Royal Arch of Enoch. That's out right now. You can get it in paperback. You can get it on Kindle, on the ebook. And again, all my books are, available on, Amazon Canada. If you're in Canada and listening to this, you can get the ebook or the print edition through Amazon Canada. But yes, I get into all that esoteric architecture in my first book, The Royal Arch of Enoch.
All right, I'm just trying to catch up on the chat room here, and I think we're almost caught up here. Finally. And I am going to ask you then, let's get into some of the more of these Easter eggs, because so many movies have them. Is there a reasoning why maybe certain genres of movies have them different? Like, are they more in comedies? I think, looking back on it, Wayne's World, in the original Wayne's World, and even Part 2, they seem to make fun of a lot of these Easter eggs that were planted.
No, I don't think they're. I think the symbolism is it can be in any sort of movie. I found it, my goodness gracious, all over the place. I mean, I found it in comedies. I found it in horror movies. I found it in dramas. I mean, you get into the Arthurian legend being a solar allegory. You will find this being hallmarked and being touched upon in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. King Arthur is a solar avatar. Go look at Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Go look at the symbol on Grand Chapman's chest and his flag that Patsy is carrying around, and you'll see what he is personifying. So you'll find it in drama movies, you'll find it in action movies, you'll find it in horror movies. The esoteric imagery, seems to transcend Hollywood. It doesn't seem to favor a genre. At least that's my take on it. At least that's what my study has revealed on it. It doesn't seem to favor one genre over another. It just seems to transcend Hollywood in general. And there are numerous, genres of movies, pretty much all of them that, in one form or fashion, this esoterica turns up in. It seems to just transcend Hollywood in general.
Mm-hmm. John is asking on Twitter at #SpacedOutRadio, have you come across many movies or any at all that don't have symbolism?
Sure. Absolutely. The Quentin Tarantino films. I haven't been a fan of his latest ones, but I love Pulp Fiction. I love Reservoir Dogs. I have both of them here on Blu-ray. I've watched them numerous times. I've found nothing in them whatsoever to mention in any of my books or even worth talking about. Just because a movie is devoid of esoteric imagery does not make it a bad film. I love those two movies. There are other movies. I have to be, when I break down a movie, when I analyze a movie, I have to be 100% convinced that this imagery is there, that this is going on inside the movie. My standard for this is high. If I am not convinced that this imagery or these occult, techniques are not being employed, I do not analyze the movie. And I only analyze movies that I would have. My standard is, could I present this to a judge and jury? That's pretty much what I hold myself to. If I believe that this is going on, and could I convince a judge or jury that this is happening in a movie? Those are the movies I analyze. If the movie does not meet that criteria, I do not analyze it.
Let's get to Jamie's question on Periscope. He is asking, why do you think the symbolism is in all of these mediums? Who do you think it's meant for?
Well, I'd have to. When you say all of these mediums, I assume we're talking movies here. I don't know if it's intended for. I think it's a device for the movie makers. It's a device. It's intended for the audience in general. It's a way for the movie makers to make mythology. So they want to influence and impact, the audience the way a Shakespeare play would. Watching that on stage, it's designed to convey this archetypal imagery to you, and they're very effective at it. Especially movies. This is a very powerful medium. But you find it. You can find esoteric imagery and other things. I use it in my books. A lot of my books, like I said, I mentioned some of the imagery and, so one of the techniques I used in cinema symbolism, I use esoteric, techniques in my books as well. Music, you get into artwork, album covers can have esoteric imagery in it. So it's a big, broad field. I try to limit it to, basically movies. The first book was about Freemasonry and Masonic architecture, and Masonic symbolism, in popular and material culture. And how about, I guess Masonic rituals and things like that, Masonic history. But it's a medium that I believe is intended for everybody. I don't think it's meant to exclude anybody. And, when it comes to the movies, these guys are very masterful with it. They know what they're doing, and they know how to use it. That's I'm 100% convinced of.
All right, let's get over to Dennis's question up in Edmonton. He says, could you please better define what an Easter egg is as opposed to symbology and imagery?
Yeah, I use the term Easter egg loosely. It's not a term I'm a big fan of. I don't mind it. I used to like what I describe it as is esoteric themes, esoteric imagery, occult undercurrents, mythology, symbolism. That's really what I talk about in my books. Easter eggs, I do get into a little bit because that is part of it as well. So like an Easter egg would be, like in Cinema Symbolism 2, I have a subsection called Easter eggs in Halloween 3. One of the movies I analyzed was Halloween 3, and that has more of like an Easter egg feel to it. And I also like the dichotomy of the two holidays there. So like in Halloween 3, for example, the town where Silver Shamrock Novelties is located is called Santa Mira. Okay, that's an Easter egg. That's a direct reference to Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which was one of the movies that Halloween is homaging. And in Halloween 3, you have the robots, the Kabbalistic golems, who's human, who isn't. And this is what's going on in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, who's a pod person, essentially. So by naming the town Santa Mira in Halloween 3, that is a direct Easter egg, let's say, to Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Another Easter egg in Halloween 3 that I liked very much was in the first two Halloween movies, you had Jamie Lee Curtis, who was the protagonist heroine. And most people aren't aware of this. Jamie Lee Curtis actually appears. She doesn't appear, but is actually in Halloween 3. And again, this was what I would call an Easter egg. She is actually the narrator, the voice of Santa Mira's curfew announcer and telephone operator. So the next time you're watching Halloween 3 Season of the Witch and you hear Santa Mira's curfew announcer, and telephone operator, that's Jamie Lee Curtis's voice. That to me is an Easter egg. The stuff with the repetition in The Shining and the Black Swan, February 12th, that to me is not really an Easter egg. I guess technically you could call it that. That to me is like an occult undercurrent or an occult symbolism, where that goes a little more deeper than an Easter egg. The two overlap. I prefer the term like esoteric symbolism, esoteric, undercurrents, mythology. But, Easter egg, some people call it that. I have no problem with it. It's not anything that I'm going to freak out over or anything like that. I do use the term occasionally in my book. In like I said, in Cinema Symbolism 2, I have a subchapter called Easter eggs in Halloween 3. And I'm going to carry that forward in Cinema Symbolism 3. I have a chapter actually called Easter eggs hidden in the Bates Motel. We're going to go more revisit Psycho again and get into the television show. So it's not a term I'm, have no problem with or anything, but I do prefer the term esoteric imagery, occult symbolism, but you can call it an Easter egg. I guess I have no problem with it.
Let's get to another question here. This one comes from Raquel, who is asking, in Pulp Fiction, would the case with Marcella Wallace's soul be considered imagery?
Well, that's a theory. That's a total theory. I don't think it's esoteric imagery. That's a theory that the thing in the briefcase was his soul, but no one knows what it was. So that's not really what I'm looking for when I do that. That's really more of a fan theory that's in the briefcase. You can get into a lot of fan theories when it comes to movies. That I kind of I don't really get into that so much. So.
All right, let's move on to questions from our audience. Joseph is asking, Robert, would you attribute the archetypical symbolism to the popularity and constant making of generic superhero movies?
Yes and no. Yeah, to an extent, yes. I have to admit that I've fallen behind in the Marvel Universe world. I have to go take a look at some of those. I know people want me to watch Doctor Strange. I've been told to look at the Guardian of the Galaxy movies. I haven't, to be honest with you, I'm sitting here talking to you. I haven't seen those yet, so I'm not going to get into that. Certainly, I grew up with DC comics, so I'm more akin and attuned to DC comics. I mean, certainly you do have archetypal imagery. I mean, Superman is the Christ figure, the Christ Savior figure. The solar, God man, Christ figure, comes to Earth, the only begotten son of, heavenly parents, sent to planet Earth to perform miracles to save mankind from itself, resurrects the dead in the 1978 Superman by, resurrecting Lois Lane, can battle, performs miracles in an effort to teach mankind the error of his ways, does battle with Lucifer, Lex Luthor, right? So Superman, definitely a Christ archetype. Batman, Bruce Wayne, ties into notions of the conscious ego and the Jungian shadow. And even with these archetypes, the seductress Lilith, Catwoman, Janus, the two-faced god of Greek mythology, Two-Face, Harvey Dent. So yeah, you'll find this mythology, these archetypes coming into the DC universe. I have to be honest with you, I've fallen so far behind on the Marvel universe. I got to take a look at these movies again. This is something I can't cover every one, but I want to take a look at Doctor Strange and the Guardian of the Galaxy movies for Cinema Symbolism 3. So we'll take a look at those, see what's going on in those, see if there's any archetypal imagery. But yes, superhero movies, definitely the DC universe definitely gets involved. Definitely uses. At least with Superman, the Christ archetype, no doubt about it.
Guy is asking, subliminal messages have been proven to influence and make people do specific things, example like brainwashing, and they don't know why. What is the end game of this through movies?
Mythology making. To transform a movie into modern day mythology is the end game of what these cinema, people, these movie makers are out for. They want to make their movies into modern day mythology. They want them to be remembered, and they use this esoteric imagery to accomplish this end, and they do a wonderful job at it. I do not think, again, we'll have to agree to disagree. I don't think it's akin to brainwashing in any way, shape, or form. Planting, using the Joseph Campbell monomyth in a film, I do not believe that is akin to brainwashing, but that's my take on it.
Joe says, artists have been putting symbols in their work since the Renaissance. It doesn't mean It's evil or conspiracy, it's just art. How does one tell the difference?
Well, you can look at the motivation of the person who's doing it. I mean, that's just it, and incorporating the sacred ratio into, that this has been so misaligned, that the symbolism is brainwashing and, predictive programming. These are terms that are just so misused when dissecting this. And, you hear with the architecture, oh, this is evil. The alignment, for example, you hear this all the time that the architecture of this is evil. It's not. I mean, at all. It's the exact opposite. It's a way to invest divinity into your artwork, to your architecture. For example, I always used to hear, a lot of the conspiracy people, these alignments, these astrological alignments, this was somehow evil. I mean, they don't say why, but you look at the Supreme Court building, for example, in the United States. This is a good example. The cornerstone was dropped on October 13th, 1932. That is a direct alignment to the constellation Libra. the great judicial scales of justice in the sky. So you want your Supreme Court building to be aligned to that constellation. You want to draw down symbolically the essence of that constellation to imbue your Supreme Court building with it. This is not meant to be evil in any way, shape, or form. The idea was that the stars and the planets and the constellations are closer to God in heaven than we are. So by doing so, you're drawing down divinity. By doing this, this was no way ever intended to be evil. I mean, you hear the alignments with Washington D.C. and the streetscapes. I mean, these guys would be spinning over in their grave if they thought this was meant to be taken as evil or brainwashing or something. And it's the same thing with the movies. I think it's sublime. I mean, I think in many instances it's very beautiful that these filmmakers will go to these great lengths to incorporate, I mean, these esoteric themes in their movies. I mean, hide it in plain sight and do it very well. I mean, that's the mark of a master craftsman. I mean, that's not evil in any way, shape, or form. When you say evil to me, I mean, I think of Charles Manson. I mean, I think of John Wayne Gacy. I mean, how is putting the date of February 12th under an image of Winona Ryder evil? I mean, it seems pretty ludicrous to me. But I mean, I think it's just very, sublime and artistic. And I just love the way these filmmakers will go to incorporate this occult imagery into film. Now, can it be negative? Sure. Of course, everything casts a shadow in this world. Anything can be designed. I mean, the symbolism could be trying to convey something negative, a negative emotion or something like that. So, I mean, that always, I mean, a lot of these movies that have these images are very dark. I mean, The Exorcist, I mean, Black Swan, I mean, these are very dark films. I mean, are very negative movies. I mean, my goodness gracious. If you watch the movie Black Swan, between the lines and you pay attention to the imagery, it's there, but it's hidden. I mean, it is completely implied that the mother and daughter of Nina Sayers and Erica Sayers are incestuous. I mean, that's very negative. That's very dark. But they convey it, and they convey it very well. The movie maker conveys it very well. But I mean, that's a very dark theme that these symbols are being used to convey. So is it all positive? No. But is it Pavlovian brainwashing? No, I don't think it's that either.
What about Disney movies? Disney seems to be all over the place with its movies and hiding these little symbolisms.
Sure.
Do they take it too far, or what's their goal to symbolize cartoons?
Well, the cartoon is a cartoon, but the animation can be like anything else. It can contain esoteric imagery. Many of the early Disney movies come out of the world of the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, such as Snow White and Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty. These were very dark. Disney gets beat up on these all the time. These have very archetypal imagery, the sacred feminine, the divine masculine, the unification to defeat the evil queen. These come out of folklore. These come out of fairy tales. A lot of times the fairy tales are much darker. Disney waters them down, actually. For instance, in what's the movie? Cinderella, where the slipper doesn't fit the sisters at the end. It fits Cinderella, but it doesn't fit the other sisters. In the actual fairy tale, the sisters actually cut off their toes to try to fit their feet into the slipper to marry the prince. They actually cut off part of their feet. This obviously doesn't turn up in the Disney fairy tale, the Disney animation. But Disney incorporates the imagery, the archetypal imagery that's in the fairy tale. Disney movies is a very deep study. We won't have it. I see we're running out of time here. They go through a dark period in the 70s with movies like the Witch Mountain movies, The Black Hole, Something Wicked This Way Comes. This is where they tried to target a adolescent audience, and this is where a lot of the negative imagery of Disney comes from. It does have esoteric themes in it, by the way. In 1989, 88, this is when you had the Disney Renaissance, where they started putting out these movies every summer that were just these mega blockbusters with the catchy music, the celebrity voices. The first one was The Little Mermaid. The high watermark of this was The Lion King in 1994, it's very esoteric. overloaded with occult imagery. We won't have time to get into it. I get into the Walt Disney movies in Cinema Symbolism 2. I take on some of them, and I'm doing it again. I'm going to continue on with the Disney material in Cinema Symbolism 3. Unfortunately, I mean, it's just too deep. We won't have time to get into it. But to make a long story short, yes, there is esoteric imagery in Walt Disney movies.
But should they be doing that with children's movies? What's the purpose of influencing children?
Well, the problem was that in the 70s and 80s, they were making these movies for adults and teenagers, but parents were taking children on the Disney brand to see them. But no, Disney was remaking fairy tales, into movies, and these are morality lessons. These are archetypal imageries: the prince, the fairy godmother, the dark evil queen. And they just packaged them for children. Like I said, the fairy tales are much more darker than them. Disney got into trouble when they started making movies for teenagers, and parents were taking their kids to see, movies made for adolescents, and it was upsetting to the child. And they were basically going off the Disney brand. That's where Disney kind of got into trouble with this. But certainly, movies like Snow White, Cinderella, there's no harm in letting a child see those. They are archetypical. They are morality tales. They have religious themes as well, such as, even Fantasia does as well. But, it's movies designed for children based on ancient fairy tales, watered down by Walt Disney.
Is it to try and maybe establish these messages for children as they age that they will remember? Therefore, when they are adult, maybe it's a product, maybe it's masonry, maybe it's something else that they now want to get involved with because of that influence since childhood.
No, I don't think so. I think it's I don't think it's that. I think it's just I think it's more of how can I say, imagery designed for children that is pretty archetypical. I'd say it's almost innocuous. I would say esoteric imagery. If you're going to go down that route, you could also craft the argument that when you're dealing with these children's movies, that the child is sitting next to a parent. So a lot of times the movie, this may be the way for the parent to get involved, to have these, esoteric themes, maybe being more targeted towards the parent than the child. This seems to be the case, certainly with something like The Lion King. This is overloaded with occult imagery coming out of Egypt and solar imagery that a child probably wouldn't pick up on, maybe subconsciously, but that to me seemed more geared to an adult than a child. And it's great imagery. I mean, and it also has The Lion King has loads of references to Shakespeare's Hamlet in it as well. So really, no surprise that this wasn't the second highest grossing movie of 1984. But no, the Disney movies, like I said, they get a bad rap. I don't think they really should. The fairy tales that these things are based on are much darker than Disney's animated equivalent.
We got about a minute left with you, my friend. What a fast moving show tonight. Thank you so much for being on Spaced Out Radio. Always appreciate your time, Robert. We're definitely going to have to do it again later on in the year. Please tell our audience where they can find your books, your website, everything about you in case they want to get in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Dave, for having me on Spaced Out Radio. The show was tremendous. I love being on. I love taking the questions, always very informative. And I love being here. And I look forward to coming back. All my books, Royal Arch of Enoch, Cinema Symbolism 2, and of course my first work of fiction, A Pact with the Devil, I'm most proud of it, are all available on all the online major retailers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. My website for more information about me to buy the books is my name. My name is Robert W. Sullivan IV. So my website is www.robertwsullivan.iv, the letter I, the letter V for the fourth.com, robertwsullivan.iv.com. Links to buy the books there, information about me, links to follow me on Twitter. I have a YouTube channel, links to that. I have loads of archived interviews there, click playlists for Freemasonry movies, literally hundreds, probably of hours. That's all free content. Links to follow me on Twitter, information about me, information about shows I'm going to be on, upcoming appearances. Again, links to buy my books. They're available on all major online retailers. Royal Arch of Enoch, Cinema Symbolism 2, and A Pact with the Devil. Check those out. www.robertwsullivan.iv.com. Check it out. very easy to navigate, very, where to find all the information about me. And again, thank you, Dave, for having me on. Much appreciated.
Anytime, my friend. You hold on. I'm going to wrap this thing up. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thal rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. 2 weeks tonight, my friends, I am heading to San Francisco for UFOCon 2018 at the Holiday Inn Airport Hotel. I want you to join me. Go to caufocon.org. Get your tickets today. Tomorrow night on the program, we have Sheila Renee Parker. She'll be talking witchcraft, spells, and so much more starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. I want to say a big thank you to everybody at home listening in, whether you're at work or in your car, wherever you may be. A special thanks to everyone on Periscope.tv. Thank you so much for hanging out with us live during the program. Everybody on Twitter at hashtag Spaced Out Radio. If you're in the Spreaker chat room, thank you so much for all your comments. Almost 1,400 comments tonight. You guys were brilliant and on fire. About 98% of them were Trip and Gee's repeated questions, but that's okay. Want to give a big shout out to all the veterans in the SOR Space Travelers Club as well. You guys were amazing. Thank you so much for sharing this show. Thank you for helping us become one of the more popular nighttime entertainments in the paranormal, because together, my friends, we own the night. I will talk to you in 21 hours from now. I'm looking forward to it. I hope to see you back as well. See you tomorrow night. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Good night.